Sword of Coming Chapter 1001. There are 10 heroes and 4 candidates in the ancient world, and 2 of them are here now, Li Sheng and Mr. Sanshan Jianghu. According to the realm, the cultivation base is cost-effective, and it should be divided into 3 grades. Of course, the first grade is Li Sheng, Mr. Sanshan Jianghu, Zheng Juzhong, and the 3 monks are all 14. Then there are Yu Xian, Lu Yan, Bai Jing, Xiaomo, who have not yet joined the 14 realms. In the end, of course, Qin Pingan, who was not even in the 5 realms for the time being. Only Li Shixing has a special identity, and it is extremely difficult to accurately define his true realm of cultivation. If it is only based on the Taoist age, it should be Mr. Sanshan Jianghu, Xiaoma, Bai Jing, Li Xing, Yu Xian, Lu Yan, Zheng Juzhong, Li Shixing, and Qin Pingan. But today's Li Shixing, the future headmaster of Baiyujing Koming, and Beidasheng Zheng Juzhong, Chunyang Lu Yan, in the eyes of the most holy masters, all have the hope of being among the top 10 in the future. So no matter how you calculate it, Qin Pingan is the one at the bottom. It's just that he is young, but he has seen a lot of big scenes. Qin Pingan is not at a loss. With a heart like water, he can do whatever he needs to do. When Qin Pingan followed Jing Zhezhong's reminder, he put away the thoughts of different sizes. The Qin Pingan, who was copying several Taoist books on the first floor of his own downcast mangosteen, instantly became dull, and he kept his pen-lifting posture for a long time. In the general station of Daliuzu, a monk's figure used the method of escaping the earth. In the secluded place in the remote mountains, he found a cave between the gaps in the stone walls. His figure instantly resembled a cicada shedding, which was actually a substitute talisman. A middle-aged Taoist priest who set up a stall for fortune-telling and helped to write family letters has been earning money here for some time, especially helping to check the marriage between men and women. The matter was quite effective. The wandering Taoist liked to drink, so he took a few gulps from the wine gourd, and suddenly his head slammed on the table and he fell asleep. A qi practitioner from a foreign country who was enjoying the scenery in a xianxia inn in Qingxing country immediately returned to his room, closed the door, sat cross-legged on the futon, folded his hands on his abdomen and fell asleep. In the realm of Xinjiang Mountain last year, there was a qi trainer who did not record the genealogy of the peaks. He relied on the cultivation of the 3 realms and all the way to get in touch with wealth. He just became a guest of a certain peak sect. When there is a gap, I sit by the river to fish, and when a fish bites the bait, I don't mention the rod. Qin Pingan was a little embarrassed and hesitant, but he was not reluctant, but it was not easy to do it. Just not waiting for Qin Pingan to ask, Zheng Juzhong obviously figured out something, so he laughed again. You don't need to recall this peace of mind, otherwise you will give up halfway, and it is easy to hurt the root of the Tao if you are not careful. The current you don't say anything. I can just withdraw from the outside world and return to the village school to recuperate. Besides, I don't want to be resented by that existence, and then be blocked by Wen Sheng and scolded in the streets. Lu Yan smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Qin, I never thought we would meet so soon. Qin Pingan clasped his fists in return. I have seen Senior Chunyang. After that, not daring to delay, Qin Pingan immediately sacrificed 2 flying swords of his life, covering all the monks except Li Sheng and Mr. Sanshan Jianghu. According to Qin Pingan's rough estimation, they were at least millions of miles away from the sacred image, and with the current nascent soul realm, they could at most support a small world of birds in a cage covering 1,000 miles of jurisdiction. A scrawny old man with beard and hair like snow, wearing a very loose purple robe, hanging barefoot in the void realm. The purple robe on the old man's body is called purple qi, the feather coat on Yudo's body, the 7 lights of the Dragon Tiger Mountain Celestial Master Zhao Tianlai, also known as the Lord of the Law, and the ink-colored dragon robe of Yangji. It is one of the top 10 robes in the world. This purple qi robe is painted with a black and white yin and yang fish. There is a crystal-clear gourd hanging from the waist of the old man, and you can clearly see the magnificent inside. Elephant. The starlight is dazzling, and countless stars are clustered and gathered into a river, just like the entire Milky Way in the sky has been copied. The old man who was supposed to be in the 14th realm of Taoism in the outer world, Fulu Yuxuan, was praised by the world as the word Fulu, that monopolized the world. Yu Xian flicked his fingers a few times, and there were ripples of spiritual energy at the boundaries of several heavens and earth. He nodded with an expression of admiration in his eyes and said with a smile, Not bad, good Xuanhuan. After talking about the scene, Yu Xian really has some doubts in his heart. After all, the young hidden official today is not the Qin Pingan who borrowed the 14th Taoist law from Lu Qin. In fact, a pure martial artist, even if he is in the limit after all, is a cultivator who is only nascent soul. How can he help? What is the significance of creating a world of 1,000 miles with flying swords now? Therefore Yu Xian couldn't help asking Lu Yen in his heart, "Fellow Taoist Chunyang, that's all?" In fact, the old man and the Taoist priest who was said to have returned to Haoran from the Qingming world not long ago, were the first to meet Yu Xian. Lu Yen smiled and said, "Senior Yu, just wait and see." Yu Xian had to press his doubts down and nodded. Building a small world formation is not a trivial matter for these cultivators. Of course, speaking of conscience, the tenacity of this small world is still beyond Xian's expectations. Leaving aside those big talismans that press the bottom of the box, even if Yu Xian made his own shots, it is estimated that there are not more than 20 attacks. Talisman, it is not necessarily able to break the barrier of heaven and earth. The annoying thing about Jianxia, in addition to xianxia sword breaking all methods, is especially the strange magical powers of these flying swords. Shouldn't Wen Sheng and Li Xing discuss with each other, hoping to help closed disciples add a piece to the merit book of the Confucian Temple? If it was someone else, Yu Xian would still worry about whether he would use the heart of a villain to control the belly of a gentleman, but if he could be replaced by an old scholar, Yu Xian felt that he would not feel wronged by the other party. I am afraid that even if he confronted the old scholar face to face, it would be nothing more than giving up. In a word, so what, if you are not convinced, you come and hit me. Chen Pingan said, I urge you to let go of your spiritual sense a little bit, and visualize where your own Taoist place is usually used to practice qi. Zheng Juzhong was the first to visualize a white emperor city Liuli Pavilion. Lu Yen then visualized the Lgong Temple near the Fen Temple in Mengliang Kingdom. Xuanhuan came up with a gold-filled peak where the authentic mountain gate is located. Xiaomo's visualization of the dojo is relatively perfunctory. It is a thatched hut in Luobeatin Bixiao Cave, where the wine was made in the past. Bai Jing was very rude. What she visualized was directly a bright sun. The mind and imagination of these Taoist monks, because they deliberately did not set restrictions, completely released their spiritual consciousness, so they were able to manifest a clear outline in the small world, and they were all visible. But after all, they are all imaginary things. Yu Xian has no idea what medicine is sold in Qin Pingan's gourd for the time being. Then Qin Pingan took control of that Feijin Jing Zhongyue, like a painter who is best at fine brushwork and line drawing in the world, and the monks imagined their own dojo like a copy, just like Qin Pingan from the copybook, Shizai Jian Qi Shu, obtained by King Fufeng, only needs to be filled with double hooks and copied and written on the original, so it is the closest to the original. Qin Pingan's two natal flying swords, among which the bird in the cage, is an empty world like a human body. The other Jingzongyu turned into more than 400,000 tiny flying swords with one sword, and built the bones and muscles of this heaven and earth. I saw a white emperor city glazed pavilion with a roof covered with green glazed tiles. It was the first to stand around the feet of Zheng Juzhong, and instantly rose from the ground. Countless golden silk threads began to spread upward, and each golden thread was a piece of gold subdivided by Jing Zhongyue. A flying sword came out. And this 9-story glazed pavilion, carved railings and jade buildings, raised eaves, hanging bells, plaque couplets. Even the inconspicuous traces that have been rubbed on some railings for a long time, and some plaques have been blown by thousands of years of wind. The tiny cracks in the sun are clearly visible everywhere. But the real mystery is that when Zheng Juzhong opened the formation here, a glazed pavilion seemed to have opened a spiritual object, such as an order, and during this period, those golden threads are constantly adjusting the details, and they can sew and repair the loopholes and defects of those Taoist methods by themselves, and in the thousands of joint paths, the golden-colored glazed pavilion will instantly become the real color. When the last two golden threads that were still wandering were instantly connected. Array is one. The entire White Emperor City Liuli Pavilion, like. Zheng Juzhong tapped the railing, nodded and said with a smile, Shangku. Bai Jing frowned slightly and snorted, Is this all right? She couldn't help but add, This is too perverted. Then there is Xiaomo's dojo, which is still used by Qin Pingan to join forces. Zheng Juzhong deliberately took the lead in visualizing the Liuli Pavilion, which was actually equivalent to an invisible preaching, helping Qin Pingan to check and fill in the gaps. The most critical point is that there is no flexible object in the Liuli Pavilion, and it is not difficult. As for the construction of the Lugong Temple, Qin Pingan is even more skilled and easy to do. Lu Yen, who was holding a sword on his back, stood in the shade of willow trees by the pond outside the temple, and looked at the swimming fish in the pond that surfaced and pecking at the poplar flowers and water insects. The speed at which the way of peace is improving is very impressive. After that, Yu Xian's golden-filled peak became even more angry, because not only the mountains full of ancient trees, flowers and plants, but also the spirit birds flying and wandering outside the mountains appeared one by one. All kinds of buildings, landscapes, stone springs, etc. Such dead objects, Qin Pingan made their facts and truths without any stagnation, but the appearance of those flowers, plants and living things means that this world, in addition to being real, it is still alive. This is what Li Hisung previously called assistance. After Qin Pingan sacrificed the sparrow in the cage, and before he built a dojo through Jing Zhongyue, Li Shixing did not sit idle, only to see this Confucian disciple, who can be described as a nameless Confucian among the younger generation of Lizhu Dongtian, dancing in the air. Void walks above all things, just like Lu Chen's praise for no one's realm, no realm. Ling Ran Yufeng has nothing to rely on, shouldering the road to travel is too empty. And Li Shixing seems to be able to ignoring the limitations of the caged bird. It is suspected that it is rushing to the virtual world, not being a prisoner of heaven and earth. The figure is free to shuttle in and out of the sword array, and Li Shixing constantly twists out talismans from his sleeves, most of which are extremely rare single characters. The characters such as mountain, water, cloud, rain, and thunder are always written on the talisman paper, and each of them is a character with great meaning, which helps this great formation of caged sparrows stabilize the borderline from both inside and outside, and at the same time. Only in the little matter of letting living beings appear in various dojos, although Li Shixing and Qin Pingan separated again, the latter was not completely abandoned. The final result is that there are other small worlds within a caged bird world. Xiaomo sighed for a long time and felt complicated. Because my son only mentioned the 4th floor to himself not long ago, the key to the 2nd floor, the most important thing, is to fill a seemingly bottomless pit by spending countless talismans, and finally achieve a certain big in the realm. There is the beauty of the end of water is long and sky is limited, mountains are solid and soil is immortal, the sky is opposite to the ground, the mountains and rivers are interdependent, in which the 5 elements rotate, the sun and the moon. Rise and fall, the 24 solar terms throughout the year are progressive, the great road the cycle goes on and on endlessly. And this scholar surnamed Li seems to have been able to achieve this level for a long time. Thousands of years later, the cultivators of Taoism will be full of geniuses, and their level of research and skills, and their climb to the top are indeed unmatched before 10,000 years. As for Bai Jing, he was sitting in a pocket-sized sun at the moment as big as a mountain. It was more like a kind of borrowing from Qin Pingan. It was specious about the ancient dojo that Bai Jing had imagined. Bai Jing didn't bother to care about the perfunctory and sloppy treatment of his own mountain master. Lu Yin smiled slightly. Yu Xian stood on the top of the golden-filled peak, coughed a few times and praised with his heart, "The young people today are really amazing. The future is terrifying, the latter is terrifying. The next time I meet with the old scholar, the other party will turn around and praise his closed disciple." Yu Xian intends to echo a few words, so there is no need to go against his heart. Yu Xian suddenly looked strange. Come on, this kind of secret road that should be hidden in the bottom of the box is revealed like this? What if Qin Pingan asks people about the sword in the future? Isn't he losing the first mover advantage? The old man used a series of decorative expressions. It can be seen that the combination of the 2 flying swords of life of the young hidden officer is indeed rare, and it has really entered the eyes of Fu Luyuxuan. Lu Yin said, "We monks who are present will not spread it. It is difficult to say that some sneaky great monks try to draw conclusions through evolution." Yu Xian nodded with a smile. "That's right, but to be cautious, I'd better use some small ways of closing doors and blocking roads. I can't let a young man suffer like this for business." I saw Yu Xian put his fingers together, wipe out a talisman on the cuff of the purple robe, and then the talisman turned into a purple chi, lingering around Qin Pingan, spinning several times in an instant, and then gradually dissipating. As a result, Yu Xian immediately jumped up and scolded, "Your uncle, you are too careless in doing things. What kind of son of a is so haunted? What a grudge you need to deduce and observe Qin Pingan all the time?" After a while, Yu Xian started scolding his mother again. It turned out that more than one force was secretly spying on Qin Ping's numerology trend. Compared with the former's way of pulling through astrology, the latter's methods were more subtle. Yu Xian nodded lightly, raised his 2 sleeves, silently recited the word Kai Dao, 2 strands of purple talisman lingering around Qin Pingan, pulling away from the mountain dojo of the 2 forces. At the same time, Lu Yen lifted, "Raise your hands, put your fingers together, and flick your fingers on the 2 long lines of purple energy, and then wave your sleeves. There will be a sword light, like a rainbow, and it will disappear in a flash." In an instant, 2 sword lights as thin as strings, there was a thunderous vibration and momentum, and they went to 2 places, one in the vast world of the Middle Earth and the Divine Continent, and the other in one of the 5 cities in the Qingming world. A heavily guarded stargazing platform in the Lu family of the Yinyang family in Middle-earth was smashed in half by a Tianlei that fell straight down. And the planetarium in a certain city in Baiyujing was found by the sharp sword light that came from the sky following clues, and turned into powder on the spot. Outside the house, without saying anything, the precious robe on his body was directly invalidated, and he was frightened, stomping his feet in anger and annoyed. This treasure of immortal soldier rank can be repaired, but there are many things about that young hidden official that cannot be copied. The clues were all destroyed. Qin Pingan and the 2 seniors clasped their fists in thanks. Lu Yin nodded in greeting. "You're welcome, it's just a deposit for you to help protect the Dao in the future." Yu Xian smiled and said, "No need to thank me, this old man dislikes such shady tricks in his life." Li Shixing and Qin Pingan stood side by side in a bright moon, looking into the distance. "Don't worry, there are at least 2/4 of an hour before Li Xing will start to contact the wild world." Li Shixing stretched out his hand and pointed to the extreme distance. "Mr. Sanxianjiuho and Senior, you have each set up 3 Fushan mountains and a treasure river. It's just that the distance is so long that you can't really see it." Yu Xian said with a smile, "I'm just making small troubles and I can't compare to the generosity of Mr. Sanxianjiuho. It's laughable and generous. The last time I went to Fuyao Island after a fight, the hundreds of thousands of talismans that were not used up at that time were completely bottomed out, and there was not one left." Qin Pingan couldn't help but ask, "Brother Li, why don't you call some ascension cultivators to come and help?" Li Shixing explained with a smile, "Some can't help and some can't get away." Yu Xian stroked his beard and smiled. "Xianxia and Saint Wen, as well as Master Dong, the leader of the Confucian Temple, although they are all from the 14 realms, they belong to the right place and it is easy to do a disservice here. The implication of the old man is that the 14 realms of the right place and the right place have too many constraints and are not refreshing. Compared with the 2 methods of the time and the people of the way, it is still a bit less meaningful. As for the gods of the mountains and rivers in Haoran-Jiuzhou, of course, it is necessary to stabilize the mountain routes and water transportation within their respective jurisdictions. In fact, before Qin Pingan was brought here, the gods Daijia traveled around the 5 mountains and mountains in the Middle Earth, including Wangzhou. Li Yeho, including the 4 sea kings as well as Shenlin, Yanghua and other high-ranking princes of Dali in various continents, have each obtained a secret decree of the Confucian Temple, and then let them order all the subordinate gods in their respective territories and the city temples in various places. Be sure to return to the shrine immediately and sit firmly in the golden body of the temple. Zheng Juzhong had previously reminded Li Shixing that unless it was a last resort, don't come together easily. As a result, in the battle of the 3 religions, the Confucian scholar Li Hisung lost completely. There is a majestic air machine surging from the sky, like a tidal wave hitting the shore, and the caged bird world shakes with it. What a shocking mountain and rain is about to come, and the wind is full, and the real wind is in the sky. It made Qin Pingan feel suffocated in an instant. Bai Jing learned the way that millet grains spoke and hurriedly shouted, Mountain Master, open the door." Qin Pingan stabilized his body and soul and turned a deaf ear. "I don't know you well." Li Shixing smiled and said, "The opportunity is rare. It is indeed possible to properly open the gate of the world and accept the spiritual energy in it, and in addition to the pure spiritual energy, there are also some ancient Dao Qi lingering in the sky, wrapped in the wild world. To be able to escape the confinement of a great avenue of heaven and earth, to be the first to attack, and to hide in this turbulent Taoist tide, you might as well accept it first and return to Haoran afterward. There are probably 2 more tides like this. Be cautious and take it as soon as you see it," which is the consistent style of Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan immediately opened a door, and the bird world in the cage was like opening a pocket. The boundary at the door was in the shape of a horn, which could accommodate more aura. After that, the riverbed waterway of more than 100 miles is like a small water bottle with a big belly lying on the ground, making the tide of spiritual energy easy to enter and difficult to retreat. In addition, a section of the riverbed has a rising trend, making the tide head from far to near, rushing. Entering the water bottle riverbed, the tide is pushing, the water is thundering, and the waves are surging. Qin Pingan is now learning and using it. He and Li Shixing painted a gourd and temporarily painted dozens of wind pictures. Characters, thrown out of the door, such as dozens of Kazibu gods advocating, using the wind direction to fuel the tide. Fu Luyuxuan couldn't help but said, "Daoist fellow Chunyang, is it my illusion?" Qin Yingguan suddenly regained his energy, and his temperament has changed. Lu Yin answered the question, Qin Pingan used this method to follow the formation principle of the Qiantang River tide in Bay of Pingzu. The weather, wind direction, terrain and water flow all fit. In short, on the premise of not affecting the stability of the whole world, this is almost the best way for Qin Pingan to open the door to accommodate the most tidal aura. Bai Jing hurriedly turned his head to look at Xiaomo next to the thatched hut on the ground. Xiaomo, help me to say a fair word to the mountain master. It said in the book, I will be to blame if I don't take it. Lost and lost will never come again. After all, Xiaomo did as the locals do, and he helped to bargain and said, young master will share the bill with you. If you agree, I will speak to master. Although Bai Jing has regained his true appearance, his temperament seems to be like the girl thanking the dog and said angrily, what about killing pigs? Why don't you two just grab it? For Zheng Juzhong, Yu Xian and Lu Yan, the enlightened people, the number of cave houses and the aura of the acupoints have already reached the saturation level. Therefore, the aura of heaven and earth rushing in like a tide is a relatively useless existence. Xiao Mo, who is a perfect sword cultivator in the Ascension realm, is in a similar situation. Especially Zheng Juzhong, the giant of the magic way, because he has achieved an unprecedented feat, one person in 214 realms, cultivation no longer needs aura. Only Jianxiu Bai Jing, she is the best at living. Before Qin Pingan was called, she took out a lot of messy magic weapons and began to store spiritual energy. After 2 waves of tides passed, she gained a lot. After all, this kind of tidal wave caused by the collision of the 2 worlds is not a spectacle and opportunity that an Ascension realm cultivator Yufeng can casually encounter when he comes to the outer world. As for why Bai Jing didn't directly rush out of this world, of course, the overall situation was the most important thing. These spiritual energy harvests were a piece of cake. After all, the real highlight was still to come. Qin Pingan glanced at Bai Jing and estimated the capacity of her pile of treasures to receive the additional tide of spiritual energy, and said in his heart, 5 or 5, how about it? It's easy to talk, it's very fair. Bai Jing laughed loudly and his body was galloping and he went straight to the mouth of the door. Yu Xian tuted, fellow Daoist Chunyang, look at it, Jianxiu is good, you can just hand over a sword when everything is going to happen. Tinkers and toilers. Sword cultivators like Bai Jing and Xiaomo are indeed not like him, Yu Xian and fellow Daoist Chunyang. They also need to dispatch troops to those natal objects, and arrange the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth in the human world. It is necessary to adjust the state and carefully sculpt a series of details, because the chi practitioners other than sword cultivators, when they are idle and have nothing to do, are completely different from the time of cultivation and retreat and fighting with others. The interior scene of the chi cultivator, it is only said that a chi trainer like Yu Xian also needs to use the unused natal objects, caves and acupoints with different types of talismans to build different formations in the body, and at the same time consolidate the physical body and stabilize the soul. Lu Yin smiled and said nothing. After all, he is a Taoist priest, but he also knows a few swordsmanship. Moreover, Lu Yan's road to becoming an elixir is different from any cultivator in the world. Qin Pingan took the initiative to say, I was a guest at Yaolu in Tonggishao town before and I heard fellow Taoist Qing talking about the 10 heroes of the ancient world, plus the alternates. It seems that there are 14 in total, but fellow Taoist Qing only mentioned a part of the list at that time. Yu Lao Xinxian, can you help clarify the confusion? Yu Xian said strangely, the old scholar is so knowledgeable, why didn't he tell you this? Qin Pingan replied, Mr. usually talks more about academic affairs and usually gets along with each other and doesn't talk much about it. Yu Xian choked for a moment. Well, if you don't have the opportunity, you have to create an opportunity to brag about your disciple, and if you have the opportunity, you will brag about your husband. It's no wonder that you are both students and students. Yu Xian pointed to the handsome little Mo at the foot of the mountain. He is old enough, and he is Qin Yingwen's squire, so don't talk about the old yellow calendar that he has seen and heard with his own eyes. Xiao Mo smiled to help explain, my son is devoted to cultivating Taoism every day, and he is diligent in his studies. Qin Pingan was stunned looking at Xiao Mo. Yes, why didn't he think of asking Xiao Mo? Xiao Mo's face was the same as usual, and he was even more confused. He thought that his son was only trying to talk to Fulu Yuxian, and he never cared about the list of the top 10 people in the world. It doesn't seem like that. But it was Zheng Juzhong who once again helped to answer the doubts in Qin Pingan's heart. Because of the taboos of the names of the 10 heroes of ancient times, Zanyala Qingtong did not dare to say more, for fear of causing unnecessary trouble. You subconsciously don't ask the people who are close at hand. It's an instinct to be around Xiao Mo because deep down, you know very well that Xiao Mo is likely to be a few of them, and there are several causal lines that are connected with each other. Yu Xian didn't think about anything. Since the young hidden official asked for advice humbly, he leaned on the old to sell the old, gave some pointers to the younger generation and asked with a smile, 10 how and 4 candidates, what did Qing Tong tell you? Besides, the last time the old scholar asked me for a drink, he said it very honestly and to the end, and it was all open words from his own brothers. Cultivator, it is good to be approachable, old and good, but if it is too approachable, it is not so good, more or less. You have to put on the air that a monk of the 14th realm should have, so next time you discuss matters in the Confucian temple, remember to speak loudly at one point or traveling on a certain continent, walking on the road, and encountering some unpleasant ascension realm, brother you just glanced sideways. Even if he said a word, it was not domineering enough. The world's 10 heroes. There are the patriarchs of the 3 religions, the most holy patriarch, the Taoist patriarch, and the Buddha. There is also the first patriarch of the military family, the world's first Taoist and the leader of Kendo. Qing fellow Taoist only mentioned these 6 and left out 4. Chen Pingan replied, the 4 candidates have all said, the boss Jianxian, Lixing, Mr. Baizhe and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. There is no distinction between the top 10 in the ancient times and the top 10 in the world. The world's first Taoist. The fairy hairpin city in the wild world was transformed by the Taoist hairpin of this Taoist priest. How could Luopa Mountain be so fearless? How could you imagine that the next great road race, which has not been seen in 10,000 years, is so simple, especially it is the existence that comes into being in every world, not to mention the Ascension Realm Sword Cultivator. I am afraid that even a 14-realm cultivator like Wuzhou would not dare to provoke it easily, for fear of provoking the disgust of the heavens. With disgust, Yu Xian continued, there is also a female cultivator. Compared with the concentration of many top cultivators of the same era, she does the opposite, prefers to collect and compile various secretaries and spiritual books on the earth, and summarize and refining the world of thunder, water and fire. She walked alone through countless mountains, rivers and ponds, dedicated to gathering and studying various scripts such as Tao marks, thunder letters and cloud patterns on the earth, and finally she evolved 10 several Tao veins without exception. Are all along the way that later generations are hailed as the avenue to the top, and the last time is the side path that can be ranked among the ancient earth immortals. As for the Kendo leader, the reason why this old man wants to put him in the last place, I must mention it, is that this person is very strange, too strange. According to legend, this person has many flying swords, high rank and good talent. Breaking through the situation quickly, there is another point, bad temper. In all aspects there must be a best word. This person is not the first sword cultivator in the world. He was born out of nowhere with no name and surname, and his roots and feet are unknown. In addition, he has a weird temperament. There has been no clear statement about the true identity and teacher's inheritance of this sword cultivator. Some say that he is purely self-taught in swordsmanship, and some say that he is lucky and has obtained a variety of swordsmanship and Taoism inheritance. Having said this, Yu Xian couldn't help but joked. This sword cultivator and the boss sword immortal are very similar to Chao Ci and xuanhuan on the road of martial arts today. It was less than a quarter of an hour away from the shock of the last tide, and the second wave of spiritual energy was ushered in, and this time, it obviously contained more scattered Dao Qi. As for the momentum of the tide, it has more than doubled compared to the last time. The caged bird world is like a small boat in the sea, swaying and bumping. Bai Jing grinned. She wanted to say something sarcastic, but she quickly wanted to understand the joints. Qin Shanju is really a diligent and thrifty housekeeper, and his face and name are all floating clouds. Yu Xian and Lu Yen looked at each other and smiled. It seemed that there was no need to remind the young hidden officer. She stood up suddenly. Mountain Master, start work. While Chen Pingan opened the bottle-shaped door, he used the increasingly turbulent tide of spiritual energy to sharpen the blades of the 2 flying swords. Then stabilized. As a result, layers of glazed glaze appeared on the outside of the caged bird's barrier. This is a unique scene that can only appear when a long river of time rushes against certain roads, but Chen Pingan simply didn't have time to collect them. Suddenly, several subtle lights that were not easily detectable came in arcs in the void outside the sky, far away from the Holy Law and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, and went straight to the world of birds in the cage. It must be the sneak attack of some great monk in the wild world. Bai Jing originally just wanted to bury his head in earning money and was too lazy to pay attention to these tickling methods of attack, but when Xiao Mo appeared beside her, he immediately shouted, presumptuous. A sword light swept away in a hurry going out of the door. Dozens of sword lights are instantly separated outside the door, and then hundreds of sword lights are separated thousands of miles away. The key is that every time the sword lights diverge, it does not decrease at all. The sword energy and sword intent contained in the initial sword light. Bai Jing smiled and said, "Little Mo, my swordsmanship of casting a net is okay, right?" Xiao Mo just held his breath, watching those wild spells that were smashed by Bai Jing's sword light, and remained silent. After that, there were two more intensive attacking techniques, both of which were easily cracked by Bai Jing's, casting a net with one hand, and neither could get close to the caged bird within 1,000 miles. Yu Xian was quite surprised. The old man only knew about this woman Xianxia who met for the first time and called herself Xiego, but she quickly changed her tune and said that her name is Mei Hua now. And the strange fellow Taoist with the Dao name Shizhu spoke more and more frankly, saying that he and Bai Jing were sword cultivators from the wild monster tribe 10,000 years ago, who were in the Ascension realm and were woken up by Mr. Bai Zhe from their deep sleep. They are all practicing in Luopao Mountain now, and they will not get involved in the disputes between the two worlds. This time, being called to the world by the little master, Bai Jing was limited by the agreement and would only watch on the sidelines just to join in the fun, but as a squire and dead soldier beside his son, he did not have any rules and regulations, so he would naturally help out with his sword. Do your best. Of course, Yu Xian has a concept of the killing power of an Ascension realm sword cultivator, but is this white scene too strong? She only said that her hand cast a net, if it was used in those few ferry crossings in the wild world or some battlefield. Lu Yin said in a heartfelt voice, "The circulation of the great Tao is unhappy. Since ancient times things have fallen." He smiled and said, "It seems that it is a talisman drawn by Zhou Qinggao, and I entrust Fei Ran to send a greeting here. This close-knit disciple of Wenhai is very careful and he deserves it. He is the #1 admirer of Lord Yingguan." End of this chapter. Sword of Coming Chapter 1002. Today's Zhou Qinggao, the former leader of the Jiaoshan account, xuanhuan, is indeed the #1 admirer of Qin Yingguan in two world-recognized places, just as Zheng Zhuzhong joked. When Qin Pingan was stationed at the half-sword Qi Great Wall, Bamboo Concubine asked the young hidden officer to allow him to climb the top of the city, and asked Qin Pingan for advice to resume the battle together. Later, the members of the discussions between the Confucian Temple and Toyue Mountain, the two worlds confronted each other, and Zhou Qinggao made no secret of his admiration for Qin Pingan in his words. Yu Xian glanced at the ashes of the talisman destroyed by Zheng Zhuzhong, nodded and said, "Good talisman. It's just that the talisman painter's methods are a bit shady, and he seems to be deliberate, obviously targeting this young hidden official. Because this talisman has a threshold limit, it is necessary to collect a person's blood. In addition, hair, nails, saliva, etc., can be used as the talisman paper for this talisman. It is possible to capture part of the soul and mind, and the talisman drawn will of course have a higher rank, and then draw the image of a Qi practitioner on the talisman, and write the exact birth date, etc., to be considered a talisman." Qin Pingan frowned slightly and quickly calculated in his heart. In the Sword Qi Great Wall, not only Qin Pingan himself was extremely cautious, but the two elders were also very careful, as the housekeeper of Ning's house and Nailin Yeshing as the gatekeeper. Every time you wash your hair and trim your nails, you need to pay attention to tuck it up, and it is best to destroy it on the spot without leaving the slightest evidence. In addition, every time Qin Pingan drinks at the wine shop, he also pays great attention to such details. In addition, after entering the Summer Palace, Qin Pingan has been on the battlefield several times. In order to hide his identity, he will not be targeted by the wild Jiazi tent. He even used the means of disguising himself as a woman. The beautiful talk over there is often regarded as an excellent side dish by the criminal officer's line of swordsmen. Therefore, the only mistake was probably before Qin Pingan became a hidden officer, replacing Ning Yao and fighting with Li Zhen, the close disciple of the great ancestor of Toyue Mountain. There are all kinds of strange techniques on the mountain, and it is really hard to guard against. After returning to Howren in the Yellow Flower View in the Mirage City of the Daquan dynasty, Qin Pingan, a swordsman named Pei Min who had been incognito, used an oil paper umbrella as a flying sword to penetrate his body. Because of the seal of that party, the spectator Lu Mao, who has passed the inspection of the Confucian Temple, can definitely rule out the suspicion unless are those two little Taoists who have not yet refined their qi. If there is a chance, Qin Pingan has to go back to Tong Yezhou to personally verify the matter, or can he first send a letter to Mi Xiefeng with Fei Jin and ask Cui Dongshan to check it? Lu Yin smiled and said, "Taoist distractions are the most exhausting, and this principle must be observed." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I will pay attention." The Taoist Chunyang was reminding Qin Pingan to be careful about distracting himself. Distraction is a typical high threshold on the mountain. The income is small, and the income is not proportional to the risk. First, you need to use a precious avatar of talisman paper, but the realm of the avatar is bound to be far lower than the real body. Moreover, the substitute cannot practice independently, so it is relatively tasteless. Second, because Qin Pingan is a martial artist with a tenacious physique, far superior to ordinary chi practitioners, he can sacrifice so many talismans at the same time. Candle, the spiritual energy of a puppet talisman will be consumed very quickly. For the monks of the upper 5 realms, this kind of behavior has almost no great benefit at all. On the contrary, once those clones suffer an accident, they cannot be recovered by the real body, causing the monks to be distracted. If you are damaged and your soul is incomplete, you will regret the green intestines and complain endlessly, so the gains outweigh the losses. Jing Juzhong said, "The same mistake don't make the second time. I believe that there are already big demons in the wild world, and they have started to study Chueyu in depth, so you are looking for all the life porcelain. Hurry up." Because once the cultivator's mind cannot recover his true body, there are many sequelae, and each one is more difficult than the other. At light, it makes it difficult for monks to break the bottleneck of a certain state, and Taoism cannot be perfected. At worst, it is seized by hostile monks such as Fei Ran and Zhou Qinggao. Injuring the root of the Tao, the most terrifying consequence is to follow the example of the embroidered tiger Chueyu in the wild world, and use a method similar to imitating porcelain figures and talismans and puppets, even if this move is far from Chueyu's height. Is destined to not be able to reverse the customer as the main, but there is still a certain chance to form a situation that makes Qin Pingan a headache. The relationship between the two is like that of the porcelain man beside Cui Dongshan and the heroic spirit of Jingwenqing in the Beach of Bones. Loosely connected. A grain of mind. Even so, if the porcelain of life falls into the hands of the wild world? Qin Pingan nodded silently. Zheng Juzhong continued, "It's still too little to see the scenery on the top of the mountain, which is excusable. If it wasn't for Li Shixing who noticed the strangeness just now," he reminded everyone aloud, causing Bai Jing's sword light to only blow up a small part of the talisman. "Otherwise, Qin Pingan will fall down, and I believe the memory will be more profound." This is also the reason why Zheng Juzhong knew about it for a long time but deliberately turned a blind eye. Someone who is a little smart doesn't make a big deal and ends up suffering a little pain. It's easy to blame luck instead of admitting that his brain is not very smart. The third wave of spiritual energy failed to shake the majestic dharma of Li Sheng, and then swept across the Sea of Fushan. The Mr. Sanshan Jiuho standing in front of the crowd is like a mainstay, diverting itself when the tide passes by. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, recognized as the master of magic and supernatural power, the ancestor of the world's talisman and alchemy. After the battle of ascending to the sky, he was hailed as the master of all methods and the ancestor of earth immortals by the mountain monks of later generations. The last time Qin Pingan went to the capital of Dali, he learned a lot of secrets from Aunt Feng and the old coachman. For example, Liju Dongshan's natal porcelain firing was first a secret method passed down by the pharmacy Old Yang and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. In addition, just like the sword box that Shouchen carried on his back, Shouchen is very valuable. As Zhoumi's pioneering disciple in the wild world, Zhoumi gave this treasure as a gift in return for his apprenticeship. The sword box is painted with an ancient map of the 3 mountains, 4 seas, 5 mountains and 10 destroys, which is very different from the Taoist talisman true map that has been widely circulated in later generations. Among them, the true shapes of the 3 mountains each have an authentic situation, as if the gods were sitting upright with their corpses, the wild monkeys walked on their backs, and the clouds and dragons flew for 9 days. The 3 mountains are in charge of yin and yang, fortune, and the 5 elements. After careful refining by hand, this sword box has more magical powers, and it can be refined into a sword mound, which can nurture 9 flying swords, and at the same time breed 9 different natal magical powers. Originally, a chi trainer who was not a sword cultivator, as long as he gets this box, it is not a sword cultivator who is better than a sword cultivator. And this thing was first cast by the 3 mountains and 9 marquis, but it only fell into the hands of Zhoumi. Because of the presence of Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, Yu Xian was a taboo in the past, so he didn't tell Qin Pingan more rumors. It is said that the 2 female cultivators among the 10 richest men in the world, the trainer Lan Qi, and the Qi trainer who opened up many other ways, in fact they all have a very good relationship with Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. Cui Dongshan once made an analogy: in the outer world, let alone a monk of the Ascension, even a monk of the 14th level, is a child with bare hands, and every world he faces is an iron ball. Yu Xian sighed, "I have to admit that Zhoumi's move is still a conspiracy." Qin Pingan wondered, If the entire wild world is regarded as a fairy that flies through the air, then there must be a place in the wild hinterland. As the hub of the formation to drive this giant fairy, is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth as firewood? Xianxia shook his head. I haven't seen the doorway for the time being. Lu Yen squinted to look somewhere in the wilderness and said solemnly, half of the spiritual energy was created by throwing money at it, and half of it came suddenly, sword energy. Zheng Zhuzhong twitched the corners of his mouth. If Lord Yingguan insisted on rushing to help, instead of diverting in the middle of the road and turning to ask Jiantua Yueshan, he would have added a pile of firewood. Li Shixing waved his sleeves, and a picture similar to the trajectory of the stars in the sky appeared in the air, explaining, Zhou once used the vast mountains and rivers including Jianghu, Fuyazu and Tonghizhao to build a hidden formation by himself. The traces are very shallow, just like a vulgar man using a fingernail to draw a trace on his arm. This formation was only revealed not long ago, but it vaguely separated the yin and yang from the vast world and the wild world, so that the original two worlds are now just like two magnets that attract each other. When the abbot Firen opens the great formation, the entire barren world, the bow of the boat begins to shift immediately, plus the big demon has been planning for a long time outside the sky, and secretly moved his hands and feet. This fairy then it turned into a green road. Trajectory with faster and faster sailing speed. The third wave of spiritual energy is coming. Because he almost made a big mistake just now, Bai Jing rarely took the initiative to take a step back. Shanzhu, this time the income will be divided into 28. Qin Pingan said, no, just follow the old rules. Roughly estimated, once opening the door, it is equivalent to taking an Ascension Realm reserve full of aura into the bag. And the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is the money of the gods. After all, Shuahua, Shaoshu and Guyu are three. The reason why these fairy coins can become common coins on the mountain is that they contain different degrees of pure aura. The reason why Jianxiu is able to be the top of the four difficult ghosts on the mountain is that when Jianxiu fights with people, the spiritual energy that needs to be used and consumed is far less than that of ordinary Qi practitioners. Like Xuanhuan, one of the 14 old throne great demons, the refining palace Guandian Pavilion Dojo, the ancient broken secret realm etc. are second-class caves, so on the premise that the attacking strength of the two sides is roughly equal, it is easy to be attacked by their own spiritual energy. Xuanhuan consumed a fellow monk to death. Yu Xian squinted his eyes and said, the only fly in the ointment is that this 1,000-mile land is too small, even if we have the means to reverse the mustard seeds, but no matter how close and infinitely close to the truth the dojo is, it will eventually be limited. Yuzhen, not to mention the fact that the site is too small, I am afraid that it will be difficult to fully display our skills in the future. After all, there is the suspicion of being a dojo in the snail shell. Let's get together and nest together, not to fight the enemy but to face the whole world. Collision in case. In an instant. It's not very good. Even if we work together to split the wild world, I'm afraid it will still be difficult to stop the general trend. A few of them, no matter how powerful they are, can't directly cut the wild world in half. Unless everyone present is all 14 monks? Therefore, the old man deliberately said vaguely, and in the end, he still felt that the content of the words was rather unfavorable, and it was not appropriate to say it directly, lest the words become a prophecy. Qin Pingan said, Yu Lao Xinxian, my world can be separated, and it does not affect the one of the formation. Yu Xian was stunned for a moment. You kid didn't say it sooner. Of course, it wasn't that Qin Pingan deliberately sold out. He accepted the tide of spiritual energy 3 times. In addition to making money on the surface, it was also a means of checking the results and determining the degree of operation of the heaven and earth law. Now it's not just an estimate on paper but a real knowledge, so Qin Pingan explained, it's just that the subtiendi that have been split should not be too far apart, and the distance between them should not exceed 3,000 miles at most. Within miles, the impact and loss on each of your dojos is estimated to be no more than 10%. Yu Xian nodded and smiled and said, enough. Not to mention 10%, even if it's 20% of the loss, we can easily make up for it with our techniques and refining things. If a few of their dojos could occupy 3,000 miles alone, it would be a huge difference compared to being crowded in 1,000 miles. Zheng Zhuzhong suddenly asked, if I give you some more gold and copper coins to crawl, can I increase the depth and width of this world? Qin Pingan said without hesitation, yes, but there is a precondition. At least 500 gold and copper coins must be invested, otherwise it will be of little significance, and it will be difficult to make a qualitative change. If only 300 or 400 gold and copper coins are added. At most, when the universe is large and the universe is small, it will affect the stability of the entire world, such as too much dilution of the cultivator's dharma, it is an empty shelf, it is better to have nothing. The four directions above and below are called the universe, and throughout the ages it is the universe. This is the fundamental supernatural power of Qin Pinggan's bird in the cage and Jing Zongyi's two flying swords. It happened suddenly and there was no preparation. If he had known about today's incident, Qin Pinggan would definitely carry the remaining 300 gold and copper coins in his Xuanhu treasury with him at all times. It's just that money is hard to buy early, no, and I plan to never keep up with the changes. Qin Pinggan originally planned to take the 300 gold and copper coins with him next time he and Lu Jinglong traveled to the vast continents when he entered the Jade Realm. It is not easy to improve the rank of the two natal flying swords, especially to obtain some new natal supernatural power. The so-called sword refining of a bird in a cage is actually the improvement of Qin Ping's realm. The higher the realm, the bigger the world and the bigger the world. As for the second Jing Zhongyue, the most intuitive manifestation of improving the rank is the number of flying swords. When Qin Pinggan formed pills at the head of the city, the number of flying swords that could be differentiated was about 100,000. After successfully entering the Jade Pure realm again, after stepping over a big step, the number jumped directly from 200,000 in the nascent soul realm to 400,000. Although he traveled through the wild world, his cultivation base fell to nascent soul, but Fijian's quality the rank did not decrease accordingly. When he borrowed the 14th realm from Lu Qin because Qin Pinggan did not set out to create a long river of time at that time, according to the deduction and estimation at that time, if he can indeed become one of the 14th realm in the future, the rank of the moon in Fijianjing will be improved. For Jingachiyu or Tianshangyu, millions of flying swords can be differentiated. Facts have proved that Qin Pinggan's estimate was still too conservative at that time. According to the current situation, as long as enough gold and copper coins are eaten, it is very likely that the number of flying swords can climb all the way to 2 million or more. No wonder it was said that there were no sword cultivators who had enough money in the world. Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, I just have 300 pieces of gold and copper coins on hand. I can exchange them into grain rain money. It's better to use 1 to 10. How about 3,000 pieces of grain rain money and 3 cents of interest per year? Qin Pinggan was expressionless and said solemnly, yes. If 1 gold refined copper coin was exchanged for 10 grain rain coins, if it were placed 30 years ago, it is estimated that except for the gods of mountains and rivers who need to repair their golden bodies, almost no chi practitioners are willing to trade. But the key is that today's gold and copper coins are not as rare as they were in the early years. Qin Pinggan really didn't believe that Mr. Zheng only had 300 gold and copper coins. Zheng Juzhong waved his sleeves, and an object appeared in front of Qin Pinggan. It was an ancient ink stone, but unfortunately there was no inscription. It is in the shape of the hand-painted ink stone with the sun and the moon on the same wall. The back of the ink stone is chiseled with eye posts. Qin Pinggan is very knowledgeable, and at a glance, he can see the arrangement of the 28 constellations. Xiao Mo immediately looked at Bai Jing, who was busy picking up money. Bai Jing, who had regained her true appearance, was a tall and beautiful woman. She laughed, it's all a dowry. Zheng Juzhong was clearly trying to. Lu Yin said with a smile, in the matter of wealth and silk, the poor people are impoverished. The words of Taoist Chunyang were alluding to. It is universally recognized that Yu Xian has no shortage of immortal money. Li Shixing followed with a smile and said, there is not a single gold and copper coin on the younger generation. Gold refined copper coins are first class and in short supply. Yu Xian had to say, Master Qin said that at least 500 gold and copper coins are needed. To be safe, Mr. Zheng has already given 300 coins, and the old man will take out another 300 coins. According to Mr. Zheng's rules, the principal it is superimposed every year and calculated according to 3-point interest. In fact, in the mountains, once the interest is settled on an annual basis, it is a bit suspicious of usury. Then Yu Xian added, it's better to barter, and the principal and interest should be calculated as gold and copper coins. It really wasn't that Yu Xian was taking advantage of people's dangers. It's really that the gold and copper coins are too scarce now, and in the next 100,000 years, the circulation will only decrease more and more. The key is that this thing involves the development of Yu Xian's 2 great talismans, which happen to be related to the long river of time. These 2 talismans, together with the rest of the talismans that served as the bottom of the box, were Yu Xian's main support after he entered the 14th realm. If it weren't for this, with Fulu Yuxuan's temper, let alone 300 gold and copper coins, it would be no problem to double it. Qin Pinggan nodded, no problem. Anyway, there are 300 of them in their own treasury. When the matter is over, they can be returned to Yu Xian immediately. The other party agreed so readily, but it made Yu Xian somewhat uneasy. Being called an old immortal by a young man, and being an elder is also a burden. Yu Xian couldn't help but change his words. It's really difficult, but it can be negotiated, and the interest can be converted into Guyes money. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "There's no need for this, just settle with gold and copper coins." Zheng Juzhong told Qin Pingan the number 1005 in his heart. Although there is only one number, Zheng Juzhong's meaning is very simple, that is, to cross the next big step. Do you need this number of gold and copper coins for Qin Pingan? Qin Pingan directly shook his head. It means that even if the number is sufficient, 1,500 gold and copper coins can be added now, and Qin Pingan will not be able to refine them in a short time. Zheng Juzhong also shook his head. There are so many gold and copper coins in Beidasheng, but they don't give them. Qin Pingan even omitted to nod his head. The younger generation will not open their mouths and ask themselves for nothing. Almost at the same time, Yu Xian communicated with Zheng Juzhong in a loud voice, and asked if the two sides took out more gold and copper coins, whether Qin Pingan could go further in this world. It was obvious that Yu Xian was ready to lose all 300 or more gold and copper coins. After getting the answer that no additional gold and copper coins were needed, Yu Xian sighed, obviously a little regretful. In fact, Zheng Juzhong began to collect gold and copper coins intentionally as early as 1,000 years ago, and purchased fragments of the golden body of the gods through various channels. About 100 years ago, Beidasheng bought this thing wantonly regardless of the cost. It started from Zheng Juzhong's private ownership, and it became a course for the 5 realms of Qi practitioners in the whole Beidasheng. All need to pay a sum of gold and copper coins of varying amounts. In addition, there are many xianxia which can be used as a stepping stone. Beidasheng also specially set up an unconventional side door hilltop for this purpose. It is not named, but it can be practiced here and obtain the loan from Beidasheng. Secrets Taoism. Qin Pingan asked Li Shixing in his heart, "Can you stop it?" "There is no way to give an answer right now." Li Shixing said truthfully, "What happens next is possible. In short, we have to prepare for the worst. Especially you, although you are only the abbot of the big formation, it seems that you only need to watch on the sidelines. In fact, you only need to maintain too. It's not easy to keep the flying sword from falling." Qin Pingan nodded, mentally prepared. Li Shixing smiled and said, "Only by planning for the worst can you be qualified to expect the best result." The eldest sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi Qingqingdu. Qingming World by Yujing is the great headmaster, Ko Ming. The Confucian temple of Zhongtu is ceremonially holy, and the rest of the guests. It seems that they are the kind of existence that can be extremely trusted. Qin Pingan got 600 gold and copper coins, and immediately began refining them. At the same time, he stretched the distance of 3,000 miles from the various dojos in the world. In the distance, is the back of the young cultivator. At the same time, the mysterious Yin traveled far away, sitting in the bright moon, and the new big sun changed from the original white scene to the pure yang Lu Yen. Behind the Yin of Fu Lu Yu Xian, a bright moon wheel appeared, and behind the Taoist priest Lu Yen Fa Xiang, there was a huge golden sun. In addition, there are still 3 talented people in the formation. Zheng Juzhong's Yang Shen, Zhen Shen and Yin Shen are divided into superior and inferior, and they sit in the same place. After that, the inspiration came from the opening of Xianhuan's manuscript. Qin Pingan divided the heaven and earth into 4 seasons of the year, and slowly rotated at a speed much slower than the rise and fall of the sun and the moon. Li Shixing helped to create the weather of heaven and earth such as wind, rain, thunder, lightning, clouds and fog. As the founder and host of this great formation, just now he acted according to Zheng Juzhong's deduction results. Qin Pingan had to reluctantly and bravely sacrificed 5 natal objects belonging to the 5 elements, which was more than the rest of the monks. Piecing together the 5 elements with a higher rank, the effect is slightly better. Yu Xian sacrificed 12 talismans which belonged to the December month. Among them, Jianxiu Bai Jing and Xiao Mo were in charge of taking turns to sit in it whenever the leap month appeared. Then there are the superimposed 24 solar terms, which is Li Zixing's method. Then came the more subdivided 72 hours. Qin Pingan drove the ducks into battle again, and sacrificed 72 seals carved by his own hands. Finally, Li Shixing, Zheng Juzhong and Yu Xian, respectively, presided over and sacrificed the Taoist Luo Tian Dajiao, Zhou Tian Dajiao and Puqian Dajiao, Gongzhu Shangzhou, Diao Zhongtian, Shuangning Biu, Shuang Danxiao. The young-looking Mr. Sanshan Jiuho finally turned his head for the first time and looked back at the scene behind him. Although he quickly retracted his gaze, it was just such a subtle movement that still made Bai Jing feel a little sour. She and this guy are not unfamiliar either. The two sides met before and the other party didn't say anything. At this moment, several figures from the wild world appeared outside the sky. But they didn't dare to get close to this layered formation. The two sides were very far apart. Bai Jingxian had nothing to do. She held her chin with one hand, waved to the old friends on the other side who met again and smiled. Good luck tricks people and turns friends into enemies. The group of monks were all ancient demons who were awakened by Bai Zhe. For the time being, I didn't know whether they were watching the fun or disrupting the situation. The great demon officer B is a beautiful woman with a pale face and scarlet lips. Her natal supernatural power is the water method. Except for the anonymous who still had a lazy expression, the other big monsters were all facing the enemy and began to hold their breaths. Sword of Coming Chapter 1003. Mr. Sanxianjiuhou just glanced over there, and the group of contemporaneous monsters restrained a lot. Chen Pingan sighed with emotion. This is the unique momentum of a candidate for the 10 ancient heroes. Different from the mountains of later generations, who also pay attention to the shadow of a person's famous tree, there will be many masters of bamboo strips and bamboo strips with free realm, and chi practitioners who participated in the battle to the sky or watched the battle with their own eyes. On the top, being able to reach the top of the world step by step without exception, are all beings who are extremely familiar with fighting, not talking about others, just talking about Xiaomo beside Chen Pingan. Today, which is not the so-called invincible. Although this is the first time the two sides have met each other, Chen Pingan seems to have a long history and connection with this Mr. Sanxianjiuhou after careful research. It is only said that the last time I rushed to the wild hinterland, I finally made a sudden detour and went to Toyua Mountain, thanks to the 3-mountain talisman. Although this big talisman was not created by Mr. Sanxianjiuhou, but according to Lu Qin, it was because the senior was a guest in Baiyujing Green City that year, and after some inquiries the senior brother drew this talisman. Before the big headmaster Ko Ming disappeared, the Jade Imperial City, the 12th floor of Yujingyi leaning on greenery, often regularly preached the world publicly without any threshold, and without restricting the origin and realm of monks, all can pass through. Set up a series of gates in the territory of several states to enter the city. Mr. Sanxianjiuhou once concealed his identity and entered the city to observe. In the end, Ko Ming noticed the trace, performed the junior salute, and asked the 10-strong candidate to learn about Fu Lu's knowledge. In addition, the Sanshan blessed land occupied by Wan Yaozong was once one of the dojos of Mr. Sanxianjiuhou. As for the founder of Wan Yaozong, Chen Pingan guessed that he might be one of the anonymous disciples of this senior. Otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence that a young woodcutter from Tonggishao got a picture of a fairy family by mistake, ignoring the prohibition of the formation, and was able to break into a blessed land? You must know that in the Jade City of the Wild Moor dynasty, Chen Pingan got a coral pen holder, which is the key to open a copybook in the Linlanglu of Baiyujing, which contains the secret of the Dragon Palace. Incorporating a high-ranked Dadu Dragon Palace into a copybook, the magical powers are already mysterious enough. Lu Qin even guessed that there are still water creatures alive in that site. What is even more surprising is that a Baiyujing landlord, it took 2,000 or 3,000 years to open the ban on the mountain, and he was never allowed to enter. It can be seen that Mr. Sanxianjiuhou's talisman skills are high. Bai Jing suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "Xianju, let's discuss. While I still have a little time, I want to go and meet friends. Don't worry, I will never delay the business. If you don't believe it, I can issue a military order and I will be in the university. When the formation starts to defend against the enemy, if I fail to return to this place, I will raise my head to see you." In fact, Bai Jing is very self-aware. She has nothing to do here. Li Pu, who sits in one of the stacked formations compared to the entire array, is the relationship between a piece of snow money and a grain rain money, not to mention the other Xiaomo watched from the side. Chen Pingan looked at Bai Jing, who was eager to try, and nodded, "Go quickly and come back." Presumably Bai Jing won't turn his back on the battlefield. If she really wants to, it would be a good thing to leave the big array early. According to the previous agreement at Yellow River, Bai Jing personally promised Bai Zhe not to be an enemy of the wild, but her understanding is actually very simple, that is, not to be an enemy of Bai Zhe. Since using the entire wild world as a hammer, it was the careful method, not the instructions of Bai Zhe, so she must not be breaking the law by playing the drums here. Moreover, when Bai Jing looked at Li Jiao and his posture, it didn't look like he was here to fight. At most, he was here to join in the fun. In the local dialect of the town, he was standing by the ditch and watching the flood. Besides, she was really going to break the rules. With Bai Ze's temper, she must have appeared long ago and taught her how to behave. Therefore, with the permission of Qin Pingan, Bai Jing laughed loudly, raised his hand and patted his head, regaining the appearance of a sable-capped girl. Her figure instantly transformed into a rainbow light, and stretched out at tens of thousands of miles in the sky. The light of the sword is thin but condensed. In the blink of an eye, Bai Jing or Xiego rushed to the vicinity of the wild monster. One suddenly hovered and pointed his finger at the boy with heavy pupils. Xiego did not know where to learn from. The native dialect who came, stretched out his hand to hold the mink hat and grinned. "Li Go, how much do you want to play with my sister?" Qin Pingan asked. "What is Bai Jing doing?" Xiao Mo hesitated for a while, and after confirming that his son was not saying something weird, he answered honestly, "She plans to ask Li Go about the sword." Yu Xian sat cross-legged on the top of Jingjin Peak, grinned straight, raised his palms and patted his knees. Lu Yen twisted his beard and smiled. Qin Shan's question was a bit redundant. Qin Pingan wondered, isn't she afraid of being surrounded? The 6 ancient monsters including Li Go, are all the most powerful in the wilderness throne. Fei Fei, Xuanhuan and others are inferior to these old antiques with a Taoist age of more than 10,000 years. Although Bai Jing is a genuine Ascension Realm perfect sword cultivator, she is not a pure sword cultivator in the 14 realm after all. Xiao Mo explained patiently, Bai Jing fighting with people has never been a brain. Then Xiao Mo added, Bai Jing is one of the very few sword cultivators who are not afraid of being beaten. In other words, Bai Jing likes to single out a group, and is extremely good at counter-killing. Therefore in the ancient years Bai Jing had no enemies. First, Bai Jing will not take the initiative to provoke those who are destined to provoke, such as Little Master, Bai Zhe, Bixiao Cave Master, etc. This is also Bai Jing's shrewdness. Furthermore, every time Bai Jing uses the sword, she will never give up until she achieves her goal. In short, she is extremely patient and persevering when she has a grudge against her. It is rumored that when Bai Jing was still in the realm of Earth Immortal, he once spent a full 30 years, entangled with a senior monk in the Ascension realm, while cultivating and striving to break through the realm, while attacking and killing, often a single blow fails to achieve a far escape. The funny scenes of chasing and being chased were constantly staged, and when Bai Jing finally entered the Ascension realm, it was the moment when the cultivator completely died. Guan Yi's group of monsters, apart from Wuming's and Li Go who have a real friendship, the rest are not even allies to each other. If Bai Zhe hadn't pressed them down, they might have been trusting one moment before, and then they would have been brainstorming the next moment. In the past, Xiao Mo was used to this style of behavior and never bothered to think deeply. When I got to Luopao Mountain, I chatted with Zhu Lian earlier, and the old gentleman said a word that made Xiao Mo Daigo enlightened. As long as you pursue that pure freedom, your greatest enemy is not the rules, but the freedom of all others. On the other side of the battlefield, Li Jiu looked at Bai Jing who was confused and said in a deep voice, "Are you annoying?" The last time they were on the Heluo River, the two sides had already clashed. He didn't even know where he had provoked Bai Jing. To say that the other party covets his own magic weapon as for? It needs to be known that the wealth that Bai Jing has accumulated is equally profound. Xiego waved his hand. "It doesn't matter who you are, let's retreat away and make room for Li Jiu and me. Don't linger and make a quick decision." The man crossed his arms around his chest, motionless, and said with a smile, "It's okay to move the place, you can just think I don't exist." Xiego looked away. Guan Yi and Hu Tu shrunk the mountains and rivers, and went straight away. The old woman snorted coldly, a cane. Although she was full of complaints, she did not dare to stay on the battlefield so as not to be harmed by Chiyu. The bamboo-crowned old Taoist held a whisk, lightly patted the antlers. The white deer jumped several times, trampling circles of colorful ripples in the void outside the sky, like birds fluttering on the branches, fleeting. Xiego smiled and asked, "Then let's fight." As for the anonymous person standing in the same place, it's just an eyesore, not a hindrance. Li Jiu looked dull and didn't say a word. In an instant, the youthful appearance of Li Jiu was cut off, and a head was thrown high, and then it seemed to be bumped for no reason, like being kicked and flying out, with a slamming sound like thunder. Changed to a normal monster, the real body was cut off from the head. Very far away, Guan Yi, who was watching this questioning sword, had a complicated expression. This was the horror of the superposition of Bai Jing's two natal flying sword magical powers. There is no sword chi, and even Bai Jing does not need to use the sword will, using a flying sword that seems to exist in the long river of time, easily kills people. It is said that Bai Jing gave the two natal flying swords two names, similar to her endless Taoist names, which seemed very sloppy, upstream, and downstream. This means that when Bai Jing left the great formation of the young hidden official abbot, she had already formally asked Li Go about the sword, so she did not give the other party a chance to refuse to lead the sword. Because it involves the flow of the long river of time, for all the monks on the mountain in the world 10,000 years ago until now, it has always been an unsolved mystery. So how to restrain the two flying swords of life that Bai Jing has the first mover advantage? Almost incomprehensible. How can each chi practitioner who is in the now stop the attack of two flying swords from the past and the future? Yu Xian, who was sitting on the top of the golden-filled peak, raised his hand, put the back of his hand on his knee, kept his 5 fingers clasped together, and squinted at the battlefield in the distance. Fellow Taoist Chunyang, in the face of this unreasonable flying sword, it's tricky. Lu Yin smiled and said, those who are forced to lead the sword are not at a disadvantage. Yu Xian praised, these old seniors who have lived for more than 10,000 years really still have 2 brushes. On the surface, if a chi trainer is a prophet and is proficient in fortune-telling, he seems to be able to deal with flying swords that seem unreasonable, but the battlefield is changing rapidly, especially when facing an Ascension Realm sword cultivator. Feijian trajectory. Zheng Juzhong glanced at Xiego. This Bai Jing is indeed a kendo genius who has been famous 10,000 years ago. Seeing this, Bai Jing laughed and said, yo, I'm so angry when I get a little drizzle on my body. Xiao Mo explained in a heartfelt voice. Although this Li Go is still in the ascension stage for the time being, its defense is so high that it can be roughly regarded as the 14 stages. The reason why Bai Jing is entangled with Li Go is that he wants to find and she can crack the unique swordsmanship of the people without borders. She needs to determine a path between the two kendos. In the end, she uses the truth to break the illusion, and uses an infinitely small mustard seed sword to cut through the infinite realm of Taishu. Or cover the phantom with some greater phantasm. In the end, eating the opponent just like the previous hand casting a net, is an example of Bai Jing's exposure in this kendo, and the reason why she imitated our formation so quickly in the final analysis, it is still with her. In addition, the swordsmanship avenue is compatible, and she is now learning and using it. All this is just because Bai Jing wanted to accomplish a feat 10,000 years ago. Before she entered the 14th realm, she had to kill a 14th realm cultivator. Chen Pingan nodded. A brain like Bai Jing seemed to be qualified to enter the Summer Palace. Chen Pingan jokingly said, Xiaomo, Bai Jing, how do you know these secrets involving Daos roots? Monsieur is very sincere with you. Xiaomo's face was full of helplessness. She didn't tell me, it's just that we have been dealing with each other for a long time, and the two sides know the bottom line. Chen Pingan suddenly asked, then my 2 flying swords of life, didn't they just become one of Beijing's excellent avenue foods? Xiaomo smiled and said, she wouldn't dare. Chen Pingan laughed at himself. The premise is that I don't get alone. Xiaomo narrowed his eyes. Chen Pingan said angrily, just kidding, don't be so serious. Xiaomo said, I don't want to be her enemy unless I have to. Chen Pingan nodded and said, that's right. Li Shixing looked into the distance and said, Zhoumi is here to force the existence in the wild world to show up. Hearing this, Chen Pingan became worried and asked, it stands to reason, shouldn't that being in the wilderness be opposed to this kind of behavior? Once the two worlds collide, whether it is after a collision the two fairies brush past each other, leveling at least 1 or 2 continents, or they collide with each other in an incomparably huge depression and bounce off, or Howren and wilderness are just that. Bordering. No matter what the situation is for the landlords of the two worlds, it seems to be a situation that they absolutely do not want to see. Especially the third situation, the worst, is like letting 2 landlords, who must protect 1/3 of their own acre of land, have no room for maneuver and fall into a situation where they meet by a narrow path and face off against each other. Indeed, it is closed. On the battlefield in the distance, the sword light suddenly disappeared. Xiego pouted, it doesn't make much sense to make a little trouble. The key is to meet someone who doesn't fight back and doesn't fight back. Wu Ming waved his hand to disperse the lingering messy sword intent and said with a smile, Bai Jing, you're done with your anger, are you sure you want fight? Li Jio's face was pale and he remained silent. Bai Jing, a madman, wasted away hundreds of years of Taoism. Xiego twitched the corners of his mouth. Bai Hejing Xiehegu, now my name is Mei Hua. After all, it was cultivator Howren, and Yu Xian couldn't help but glance at the sword cultivator who was called Little Mo by the young hidden officer. Xiego stepped in front of Li Jio and faced the boy face to face. She put her hands on her hips and stared. What are you looking at? Are you still not convinced? If she wasn't worried about Xiaomo's misunderstanding, she would have smashed this facially paralyzed boy to quar. Li Shixing asked, "Do you know why Li Xing brought you and Mr. Emo together?" Qin Pingan looked at Fu Shanlu in front of him and nodded, "Because I am half the Great Wall of Sword Qi." Li Shixing asked, "Are you really willing? Are you willing?" Qin Pingan said, "As long as the Confucian Temple credits Feishing City for this credit, I have nothing to regret." Half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, this may have been the foundation of Qin Ping's enlightenment in the future. Xiao Emo reminded Bai Jing that he could return. Xiego suddenly turned his head and showed a bright smile at Xiao Emo. She no longer had the same knowledge as Li Jiao, and with a flash of sword light, she immediately returned to the big formation. It turned out that at the very front, the holy Dharma image had already stretched out a hand and resisted the entire barren world. Sword of Coming Chapter 1004. With one hand against the wild world, Li Xing Fa Xiang retreated with 1 foot and stepped on one of the talisman mountains as a support point. Millions of golden talismans in the mountains, like wildly growing vines, wrapped around Li Sheng's ankles, and in an instant, the majestic Dharma that was almost broken was instantly restored to its original state and returned to its peak. Li Sheng raised his hand again, spread his 5 fingers, and a golden round mirror appeared, and the circles of inscriptions were the original characters of the sages and sages in the Confucian temple of the past dynasties. Every golden text that spins like a vortex is pulling the stars that are listed as constellations by later astronomical images, attracting countless rays of light coming from afar and merging into the vortex. At the same time, from Howren World, there are still long golden lines rising into the sky, drawing arcs, each arc composed of words as a whole book of sages. It was just such a contact, and the turbulent wind in the sky suddenly swayed, like huge waves overlapping each other, layer by layer. Zheng Juzhong and his group in the big array felt the violent shaking of the sky and the earth. If Qin Pingan was not possessing the physique of a terrifying martial artist, I am afraid that it is only a collision like this, surrounded by the surging Qi machine. As the host of the grand formation, it has already fallen. There is also the savage monster on the side who is standing on the wall. Because there is no formation support, almost all of them are unstable. Today's Earth Immortal Qi practitioners, if they are on the avenue outside the sky, face the tide, it is estimated that they will have no ability to resist, and they will die in an instant and disappear completely. Hutus' behavior is more down to earth. He doesn't want to waste his spiritual energy and kill his magic weapon, so he goes directly behind Anonymous and Li Jiao, who are standing side by side. The rest of the ancient great demons followed suit, and they stood like geese in an instant. The old Taoist priest with the bamboo crown, whose name is Shanjun, no longer rides the white deer, but stands on the back of the mount, climbs high and looks into the distance, constantly waving the dust, slightly deflecting the constant stream of wind blowing his face. Ligo is the one with the highest defense among the big demons, so even if he is standing at the front of the geese array, his figure still remains motionless, but the 2 sleeves of his robe are hunting. Li Gu, who had a deep relationship with this scholar in the ancient times, had the most interactions, so after 10,000 years, seeing that little master again, Li Gu's mood was also the most complicated. Anonymous shook the jug in his hand and sighed sincerely, as expected of the little master. Secondly, on the surface, the rituals and saints are definitely going to be scattered in the short term. Wilderness suffered a big loss. In the early and mid-term of this battle, it was completely impossible to fight, and it would only be defeated step by step. Maybe most of the territory will fall into the hands of Howren, but as long as it is during this period, whether it is on the mountain or down the mountain. We have always been resisting in the wild, which has resulted in continuous battle losses and casualties on both sides, especially a group of great monks like Guan Yi. Every time one is killed in battle, since I have left the Xiongjian Tower in the vast Middle Earth, I can no longer refuse. With the arrival of these real names, my cultivation realm will continue to improve steadily, and the final result is that no matter whether I want to or not, I will be forced to enter the 15th realm. The biggest beneficiary, and possibly the only one, is the meticulousness who only needs to stand by in the sky. It's like a dice on a chessboard. Use Savage Baizé to exchange for Howren rights. As for the chaos that caused the 2 worlds in the process of exchanging the pieces, presumably Zhoumi will only be happy to see it succeed. Even if all the pieces on the chessboard are taken away in a chess game, as long as the chessboard is still there, in the future the world will be careful. The big deal is to replace 2 cans of brand new chess pieces. There are hundreds of trillions of lives in the world, whether they are humans or monsters, they are insignificant to Zhoumi. The sundial asked the biggest question in his heart. Baizé, why didn't you want to take over the wilderness during that riverside discussion 10,000 years ago? If Bai Zhe himself is willing to become the master of the world, it stands to reason that no one can stop this matter. Bai Zhe can take the initiative to give his real name and passively confiscate his real name so that he can fully enjoy his success, even more qualified than today's Jianxia, the former ancestor of Tuoyue Mountain, who is more qualified to enter the 15th realm and become a member of the wild world. Bai Zhe was silent for a moment, with a bitter expression on his face. The Tao is not in harmony. Once I join the savage road, due to the nature of the savage demon clan, I will eventually be devoured by this world. The secret plan of the early rise will appear, and no one can stop the flowering of this trend. The entire wild world, at most 3,000 years, will become more and more barren, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth will be gathered in a small group on the top of the mountain. In the hands of Qi Shi, at that time the other Bai Zhe, either involuntarily or according to his own heart, may really lead a dozen or so cultivators from the 14 wilderness realms and more than 100 ascension realm cultivators to frequently harass other worlds, and must cooperate with the rest. The three worlds grab more soil and life. In fact, before the riverside discussion, Bai Zhe had begged Daozu to help make a deduction. The general result is that a group of monks from the 14th realm, including the patriarchs of the three religions, had to join forces to destroy the wilderness. And this kind of annihilation is a simple literal meaning: there will be no wild world in the world. All the world was severely damaged, and the remnants of the ancient gods who were hidden in the outer world and reincarnated in the human world were resurrected. I can't suppress the ghosts, I can't restrain the gradually growing outer demon. Sundial sighed. It always seems to backfire like this. Bai Zhe smiled and said, that's why we have to cherish the beauty in our hearts more and more. She smiled. It's like what a scholar would say. In any case, getting along with Bai Zhe is much easier with Zhoumi. Bai Zhe squatted down, grabbed a handful of soil, and shook his palm lightly. Countless broken particles suspended in the palm of his hand, and the extremely fine soil particles remained motionless one by one. Bai Zhe then stretched out his hand and picked up a small pebble, and gently placed it among the dirt particles. In the process, a considerable number of debris particles had been squeezed out. The sundial turned to look at him, wondering what Bai Zhe meant. Bai Zhe said, those who cultivators pursue freedom have only two paths to take. One is to be in it, with a high realm like a stone, which seems to be able to gather or disperse the soil particles around him at will. With the slow movement of the stone, with the stone as the foundation, it gradually absorbs the debris of the soil, as if the soil is piled up into a mountain, which is getting bigger and bigger. At the same time, the surrounding soil particles began to be forced to move, and the trajectory was disordered. Some were attracted by the rotation of the stones, and some were continuously squeezed away. The movement of the small particles, like water ripples expanding outwards. Finally, the originally static debris above Bai Zhe's palm, together with the outermost soil debris that seems to be located on the boundary of heaven and earth, all began to move along with it. It is said that the mind is fluctuating, and the mind is the most uncertain. In fact, the only thing in the world that has the opportunity to achieve absolute stillness is the mind of the Tao. Bai Zhe twisted the stone again, held it in the palm of his hand, raised his arm, bent his fingers and twisted it gently, crushed all the soil that wrapped the stone and fell back over the palm of the other hand, and then only threw the stone towards in the distance. The second kind of pure freedom, that's it. The existence of the stone itself has nothing to do with this world. Bai Zhe suddenly asked, how did Zhoumi find you in the first place? Sundial carved a sad expression, obviously still a little distracted. Palpitation, she hesitated for a moment but gave a vague answer, I have been waiting for the rabbit 16 times, all of which have been successful, and I can't escape. The Hall of Heroes, which can only have a place on the throne, and Tuoyue Mountain were once the cages that imprisoned her clone, or to be more precise, the God Lord. After all, their true bodies are the whole world. This kind of imprisonment is a bit like detaining a part of the soul of a Qi trainer. It can only lead to her incomplete Tao, but it cannot be completely suppressed, let alone killed. The only demise of their existence can only be the complete disappearance of a world, such as the complete collapse of a world, the death of all living beings and no life. The first time he got out of trouble was when Daozu rode an ox into the pass and visited the Hall of Heroes built by the great demon Chuxing, and he was able to escape from the bottom. In return, he only needs not to form an alliance with the great ancestor of Tuoyue Mountain. After that, he resolved by himself, reincarnated many times and hid for many years, but he was finally found by that careful, who took her back to Tuoyue Mountain. As the wild world becomes more and more stable, in fact, her cultivation has been greatly improved compared to the first time she was arrested. Right now she was thrown to the ancestor of Toyue Mountain, who had never been able to enter the 15th realm. Therefore, the second time he got out of trouble, it was the last hidden official Jiankai of the Great Wall of Sword Qi to hold Yueshan. Jian Xiufiren, the new co-owner of the world, was secretly instructed by Zhou Mi, asking her to fulfill the contract she made in the early years. She needs to create a vortex of time somewhere in the wild, and she must ensure that there are two branches of the long river. Every immortal mansion on the mountain that stabilizes the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and every noisy city below the mountain, is an invisible ink torture to her existence. Therefore, the more deeply rooted the mountain dojo, and those dynasties with prosperous national power, the more like sores full of pus on her body. Even if there is a Sword Qi Great Wall that has been divided into 10,000 years, and the old blind man of the 14th realm, who has been divided into 100,000 mountains from the wild world's mountains and rivers, even this is equivalent to being cut off 2 avenues, as long as that Zhou Mi never interfered. The 4 worlds in the early years, Sundial's previous life, should have become the most powerful existence, and even had the opportunity to take the lead in the 15 realms and completely regain the authority of the world. But because at the beginning of their birth, the fundamental meaning of coexisting with heaven and earth is a kind of must maintain the purity of self, so they naturally reject the exchanges between the 2 worlds. Therefore, even if Zhou Mi, who was known as Tongtian Laohu, promised her that as long as the 2 sides cooperated, she could guarantee that she would eat the comrade of Hauran, and she would be able to grow and broaden her own avenue. She was skeptical about this, and she was still worried about falling into the embarrassing situation of being too high or not. Probably because of her wandering and not being decisive enough, in the end she was thrown by Zhou Mi to Toyue Mountain and locked up. The ancient heaven, and she has been reduced to the field as it is today. Back then, on the way to Toyue Mountain together, the man in the Confucian t-shirt with the lettering on her cheek smiled and said, "Together there are 2 benefits, and if you divide there are 2 harms. The reason is simple, but you don't believe it in your heart. There's nothing you can do about this, but believe me, you will definitely regret it in the future. It's a pity that people have different hearts and minds. Since ancient times they have never lost the distance between heaven and earth. The biggest difference between the demons is Zhou Mi's departure has emptied out a lot of heritage in the wild world, especially the loss of top combat power, which has far-reaching effects. For example, there are only a few of the 14 old thrones left. Moreover, Lu Cha and Yang Ji were also detained by the Confucian temple. The only big monsters who really returned to the wilderness alive were Zhu Yan, the ancestor of moving mountains, and Fei Fei, the new owner of Ziluo. The rest were either killed in battle, eaten by Zhou Mi, or disappeared without a trace. One person exploits the thin world and one person grows himself fat. This is the top, middle and bottom 3 strategies that Zhou Mi and the great ancestor of Tuyueshan openly and honestly made in the early years. In the current situation they belong to the unsavory bottom strategy, but it is the best strategy for Zhou Mi. If it wasn't for Bai Ze's return to the wilderness, he would wake up Bai Jing, the ancient monsters, and fill a certain vacancy. After all, the mutilated corpse of a cultivator at the peak of the ascension realm of the demon race is still a well-deserved treasure mountain, which can be used for refining, except for that a corpse actually has a Taoist meaning in it. If it is refined in time, it is equivalent to adding one or even several ancient Taoism techniques out of thin air. The body of the monster that finally turned into a majestic mountain did not become an owner until the riverside discussion, dividing up several worlds and assigning the location to the wild world. In the end, Zhu Yan successfully took it into his hands, and this old ancestor who moved the mountain turned the entire mountain range containing a kendo into a long sword. Hu Tu smiled a bit more intensely. "I really didn't expect that in the 10,000 years we're not here, there will be a meticulousness in the wild world. It can make this once invincible little master so aggrieved and happy, just watching he feels comfortable." But to be careful, Hu Tu still used his hand to isolate the world when he was sarcastic. Hu Tu was inexplicably hit by an elbow and flew out thousands of miles in an instant, causing his entire nose to collapse. Hu Tu didn't hesitate at all, and he didn't have time to say thank you to the nameless person. Like casting a huge net on the earth, those black smoke swarmed wildly into the wild world. A talisman hovered over the place where Hu Tu was standing. Looking at the height, it was just near the neck of Hu Tuesday. This talisman has no so-called talisman paper, only a golden word for /. Several big monsters in the vicinity all know the power of this talisman. Once Hu Tu is hit by the talisman, it will take root in the real body, especially the real name of the monster who will entangle Hu Tuesday. Anonymous put away the jug in his hand, smiled and clasped his fists. and apologize to the Mr. Xianxia from afar. For a while I forgive my sins. For the sake of drinking together, don't care. A slashing word instantly turned into 8 straight golden long lines, and finally twisted around each other to form a rope, and flew back to the sleeve of the young monk. Anonymous showed a dazed look. A long time ago, although there were infighting between great cultivators of various races that could be divided between life and death, in general, the top cultivators, no matter what kind of avenues they were. How are they from different backgrounds? In fact, their relationship is not tense, and there is even a relaxed atmosphere unimaginable in future generations. Li Go can be regarded as half an anonymous disciple of the most holy master. And the nameless person who punched Hu Tu to save the next catastrophe is also familiar with Mr. Xianxia who sacrificed the character of beheading, and the Bixiao cave master in Luobaotan. In ancient times they were familiar with them, and Jianxiu fought side by side many times, and jointly fought against the gods who patrol the earth and wantonly kill the immortals. On the wild land on the top of the mountain, the sundial carved with the appearance of a young girl raised a thin hand and lightly beat her heart. It was the great formation that Howren had set up in several places in the wild that opened, which made her feel a pain in her heart. Bai Zhe stretched out his hand and patted the girl's arm, and only then did Sundial's brows stretch a little. When Hu Tu was about to land in the wild world and secretly delighted, Bai Zhe shook his head helplessly. You said that it is not good for you to provoke anyone, but you want to provoke that Mr. Xianxia. And the most confused part of Hu Tu is that he especially shouldn't return to the earth so quickly. The soil of the wild world is not the soil of the human world? Just after gathering tens of thousands of black smoke when the toes were about to touch the ground, this big demon was keenly aware that something was wrong, and it was only a tiny difference, so he immediately raised his feet, never thinking about the wild land around thousands of miles. All of a sudden, like a wave of water ripples, he wrapped Hu Tu's ankle in it. Hu Tu complained and tried another way to escape, but it was still in vain. He dragged his way up the mountain, and the next moment, Hu Tu was horrified to find that he had come to the young cultivator. He swallowed, not knowing how to speak for a while. Mr. Xianxia said indifferently, "Don't apologize to Li Sheng?" Hu Tu's face turned ashen in an instant, but he quickly changed his face, squeezed out a smile, and bowed to the holy saint in front of him. "I was talking nonsense. I am here to apologize to the little master." You can imagine the feeling of being targeted by 2 great cultivators of the 14th realm. Bai Zhe looked up at the sky, hesitated for a while but still didn't speak. Hu Tu should suffer once. Previously they gathered together in the Helyuo, and after discussing the matter they dispersed separately. Among them the old Taoist Zhuguan, Hu Tu, and the old woman secretly acted without authorization. In the spring of this year, they walked together to go to the border of the ferry of the Sunfall Guishu. Self-confessed that with the strength of the 3 of them, not to mention sweeping the ferry, why not come and go freely? As a result, on the way there, we agreed to kill hundreds of thousands of soldiers at the foot of Mount Howren casually, so that the younger generation of Firen could see it, but halfway the old Taoist Zhuguan did a calculation and looked at the hexagram. In fact, he had already started to murmur, and after he forgot the 2 hexagrams, his mood became more and more solemn, but for the sake of face, he continued to accompany Hu Tu and the old woman on the road. After all, the old Taoist Zhuguan was cautious, so he first caught 2 monk of the demon race, the Jade Pure Realm and the Immortal Realm. First throw the Jade Pure Realm as a bait to be in charge of the formation, where the garrison of a certain great dynasty in the vast Middle Earth and Divine Continent has not yet shot. Was found traces and was intercepted on the spot. After making a few messes, let the only remaining Immortal Realm demon clan specifically kill those arrogant scouts and some small-scale cavalry troops, which is indeed very effective, and also killed several ants-like so-called cultivators who accompanied the army. Under the derivation of the Taoist priests, this Immortal Realm demon clan, like a puppet, is like an assassin, deliberately hiding his cultivation and realm, wandering around to kill those dynastic troops stationed in remote areas, specializing in killing those generals under the mountain in their side. The cultivator of the army, almost a month later this fairyland demon clan just sneaked out, and was killed by an old real person wearing an embroidered dragon robe with 2 fire dragons thousands of miles away. The more troublesome thing is that the 3 of them, the old Taoist bamboo crown, almost fell into a circle, really only a little bit. The bamboo-crowned old Taoist priest relied on the omens of a half-refined ancient divine weapon to retreat decisively and quickly. As expected, as soon as the 3 of them left their front feet, they were hiding their positions, and then a number of great monks appeared on the back feet. Except for the one who is said to be from Beiju Luzhou, the real fire dragon, there is a sword-carrying Taoist priest in a yellow-purple vestment, 2 swordsmen, and a powerful female warrior. Aside from the Howren top experts who showed up, the old woman also relied on the subtle ripples of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to keenly discover a few hidden breaths on the way. The sundial asked, "Why does Mr. Xianxia stand so firmly on Lixing's side?" Bai Zhe smiled and said, "Actually, earlier the two of them had an average relationship. I even persuaded them to fight. Some friends hit it off right away, like drinking strong wine such as Bai Zhe and the little master. Some friendship, but it is a pot of wine that needs to be simmered slowly, that is, Li Sheng and Mr. Xianxia. After the battle of ascending to the sky, in the ancient years when the world was initially determined and gradually tended to be peaceful, about 7 or 8,000 years ago, Li Sheng once made an attempt and specially invited Mr. Xianxia to come out and make a plan for the Howren world together. New gift. The affairs of the world, in the final analysis, are nothing more than divided into celestial affairs and underworld affairs. Obviously, Li Sheng and Mr. Xianxia are respectively responsible for these two matters. So there is the latter's monument to declare Yi Ming, and there are 7 big characters engraved on the monument: peace to the world, kill the stubborn. And Lu Chen also compared those ghosts and immortals hiding on the Yi Ming road, similar to the great monster Wudi in Xianzhou City, as stubborn people. Obviously, it is used to target the world to create haunts, especially those who have attained Taoism and immortals. But in fact, during that long period of ancient times, Mr. Xianxia had an excellent relationship with the first ghost cultivator in the world, who was one of the 10 heroes of that year. It can even be said that, to a certain extent, Mr. Xianxia is the true guardian of all ghosts in later generations. Zheng Juzhong, Li Shixing and Fu Luyuxuan said a word at the same time. After a while, the 3 of them deduced their own mental calculations and came up with 3 results, which are the approximate locations of the horizontal and vertical intersections of the 3 different latitude and longitude lines in the wild, and there are differences between them. On this basis, Zheng Juzhong performed the calculus alone. Soon in the wild world, there was a lack of an aide who seemed to have no name but was the true master of the city. Bai Zhe narrowed his eyes. Most of his attention today was actually on the Lord of Baidi City. Bai Zhe suddenly said in a heartfelt voice, "Dial, immediately find out the exact location of Hu Tu's hidden real body." The sundial hesitated for a moment, but for the sake of Bai Zhe's help earlier, he still nodded. Outside the sky, Li Xing didn't turn his head, just held the wild world with one hand, smiled and said, "The real body is not there, the sincerity is not enough. After all, it is an ancient great demon that has lived for more than 10,000 years, and his life-saving skills will definitely not be too bad. The killing power is not enough, run for your life to make up." Hu Tu bit his head and said, "I really don't dare to meet Li Sheng with my real body." Li Sheng nodded and said, "I said something honest." Hu Tu's voice trembled slightly and said a thin-skinned remark, "If it's all right, I'll leave, I don't dare to delay Li Sheng's shot." Li Sheng smiled and suggested, "Why don't you try it? Save standing and talking without back pain." Without waiting for the nonsense words to decline the invitation, his heart was shocked. It turned out that it was Bai Zixien who called out his real name and said solemnly, "Don't give up this avatar directly, hurry up." Just before Hu Tu made any movement, he was beckoned by Li Sheng, and his entire body swept forward like lightning. Li Sheng stretched out his hand and grabbed the head of Hu Tu's clone. With a little force, he forced the wild monster to show its real body, and then casually pressed it against the wild fairy. "The surname is Zheng, your mother's brain has a hole, do you think so?" Yu Xian glanced at Zheng Juzhong in the Liuli pavilion, and then turned to look at the old Taoist priest with bamboo crown. For some reason he couldn't help but look at the young hidden official. Every green seedling, inserted in the paddy field, is the countless talismans she scatters into the outer space. Obviously, she wants to lay out a new green road, so that the ferryboat in the wild world can follow this trajectory and gradually move away from Howren. Zheng Juzhong shook his head. Li Shixing asked with his heart, "Mr. Zheng, what's wrong?" Zheng Juzhong said with a smile, "Even if the entire established Qing Dao is changed, as long as a new trajectory that truly fits the Dao is not created, it will still be futile. No matter how advanced the Dao of Mr. Xianxia is, he can use the method of talisman to reproduce it. All-encompassing, it is not enough to support the whole world's great Dao circulation, plus the reason that seniors don't seem to often set foot in the wild land, makes this road, although the rank is slightly better than the great demon Chuxing, it can be said the degree of sturdiness is somewhat inferior. Let's assume that Zhoumi has no backers, but don't forget that there is more than Zhoumi in that new heaven. Therefore, even if there is a new road that can be roughly regarded as following the rules, it is still not foolproof. Li Shixing continued to ask, what would Mr. Zheng do instead? According to Zheng Zhuzhong, even if Li Xing and Mr. Sanxianjiuhou join forces, coupled with their stacked formations, it seems that there is still no surefire solution. Zheng Zhuzhong shook his head and smiled, it can't be me. While a stacked formation had not really touched the wild world, Qin Pingan tried to copy this temporarily unknown talisman in the Heart Lake, but to no avail. Only its shape is incomprehensible, and Fu Lu's shelf will soon be crumbling and collapse in an instant. After several attempts, it is such a bleak result. It's like the family is too thin, and you can only try to use the worst material of Huangshi talisman paper to carry the true meaning of a high-quality Taoist book. Of course it won't work. Then there is Qin Pingan's moon in the well. Due to the addition of 600 gold and copper coins, the rank has been improved. It can probably be called the moon in the well. It is a pity that the more than 700,000 flying swords are used come to set up. I really can't make time. Start a small stove. Qin Pingan immediately asked in his heart, Xiaomo, if I build the framework of this talisman, can you fill the veins with sword intent? Xiaomo shook his head and said, I'm a layman in Fu Lu's business, I can't help you and you'll lose 1,000 miles. Even if you return to Haoran, if you can calm down and deduce it over and over again in the dojo, it's estimated that you will only be wasting your sun in vain. Precious time for cultivation. Looking at Bai Jing, Xiaomo reluctantly said, it might be better to replace Bai Jing to be the sun's helper. Qin Pingan had no choice but to give up. The young cultivator entered the stacking formation in an instant. Master Qin Shan, temporarily change me to preside over this great formation, and you will prepare the backhand. In addition to relying on stacking formations to completely reverse the bow of the barbaric world and forcing it to step into a right track, laid out by talismans, it is also necessary for this young hidden officer to sacrifice a key sword in the way, interlocking and missing one. Not possible. Qin Pingan nodded. Mr. Sanxianjiuhou asked, do you know how to draw a sword? Qin Pingan replied, the younger generation reluctantly does it. Zheng Zhuzhong heard the words and smiled playfully. Mr. Sanxianjiuhou clearly noticed the strangeness of Zheng Zhuzhong, and asked in his heart, Mr. Zheng has something to say? Zheng Zhuzhong smiled and said, there is nothing to say. The original stacked formation was just like a duckweed leaf on the water. After Qin Pingan handed over the dominance of the large formation, Mr. Sanxianjiuhou sat in it, and a talisman that did not lose to the holy sage appeared behind him. Times, but not the kind of dilution, but does not reduce the degree of condensedness of these second-class authentic dojos. Bai Jing grinned, let out a snort, and then gave an unbiased and fair evaluation. As soon as the expert made a move, he would know whether it was there or not. Qin Ping's placement was unheard of, but he just scattered his mind out of his true body. Looking at the edge of the bird world in the flying sword cage, he saw Mr. Sanxianjiuhou, a Dharma image composed of countless talismans. In the end, many dragon veins meandering for thousands of miles, all the veins are gathered by the water characters. Several deities in the history of the world can see the waterway here, a head on the neck, and the scene in the mind is like a bright star. But it is not the Milky Way where Fu Lu Yuxuan's path is located. It seems to be an accumulation of countless unknown constellations. The avenue is huge, incredible, beyond imagination. The matter was of great importance, and the young monk had to remind Qin Pingan again, I am only the abbot of the Great Formation, you are the Great Formation itself, I can only try to help offset the impact of the savage world against the overlapping formation, you wait until it is really unsustainable. At that time, you don't need to support heart, just take back the 2 flying swords and leave enough strength to ensure that you can hand out that sword. In the view of Mr. Sanxianjiuhou, Qin Pingan is not only the origin of this magnificent stacked formation, but also the shortcoming of this great formation. It's just that he can't insist that one age is the age of no confusion, especially for young Qi practitioners who are less than 30 years old. To be honest, even with a vision as high as Mr. 3 Mountains in 9 hours, it is quite difficult for Qin Pingan to achieve this step. In fact, in the previous calculation with Li Sheng, there were 8 Haoran candidates who were similar to Qin Pingan. Among them, there were 3 sword cultivators such as Qi Jinglong from the Taihui sword sect of Beiju Luzhou. There are many choices such as several people or 9 people working together, and there are more than 100 kinds of combinations. The final conclusion was that Qin Pingan was chosen alone. Either those choices with great risks and benefits are relatively the most wrong-free choices. Qin Pingan nodded, I won't make a swollen face as a fat man, I will definitely do what I can. The young cultivator took out 2 blue-purple talismans from his sleeves and handed them to Qin Pingan to introduce the purpose of the talismans. One is used to fix the soul, the other can stabilize the body and can be used at the same time. Don't use double talismans unless it is a last resort. We must pay attention to the timing and do not act impulsively. Once these 2 talismans are used too early, the human body and soul will be rooted in the middle of the flood like a pillar, just like a pure martial artist who is casted with a talisman and can only be beaten. If you fight back, you only need to look at to know what happens. It is like hitting a stone with an egg. Therefore, it is best to use it to heal your wounds immediately after removing the stack to stabilize your mind and body, so that your soul will not scatter outside your true body. It hurts the root of the road. Qin Pingan carefully put away the 2 priceless life-saving talismans. The whole wild world was sailing in that Lu River, and the rites of the holy Dharma had changed from the posture of leaning back against the ferry boat, to pushing the stern of the boat with both hands. The entire back of the sacred Dharma was consumed by the wild avenues into a pitch-black nothingness. This kind of loss of the avenues visible to the naked eye is immeasurable. For any Ascension realm or even a 14-realm cultivator, I am afraid they will be involuntarily feel despair. Mr. Sanshan 2 origami characters, together with the golden round mirror made of Sage's original characters, ensure that the ferry must travel within the Lu River. The talisman Jinling, who is the maid beside Mr. Sanshan, is at the end of the Lu River, responsible for paving a new road, and has built a talisman road that is millions of miles long in the void outside the sky. The new road deviates from the green road, which creates a clearly visible arc. And Qin Pingan's stacked formation is just outside the top of the arc. Like a large formation of heavily armored infantry defending an elite cavalry army. After the ferry collided with it, it instantly tore open a hole in the cage and then slowly embedded into the stack. Suddenly there was a piercing sound like a blade slowly cutting the glass. Due to his identity, Jingsheng Shiping really couldn't talk to anyone about any personal friendship. Even if he is in the Confucian temple, he does not participate in discussions. In fact, the old Xiaotsai didn't want to be flattering, just to distract himself and chat a few words, lest he look like a sloppy young man. Walking into the pavilion as soon as I sat down, I stood up like a fire on the buttocks, but resisted not moving to the pavilion, and stretched my neck to look outside. Not still like the ants circling on the hot pan. The old Xiaotsai began to mutter and babble, like a drunk man talking drunk at the table. After reading hundreds of thousands of sage books, you can't just pull out a piece of shit. The common man poops and urinates and he can fertilize the fields, and the scholars who have a bad mind will not catch the dog if he poops. Occasionally, good things and hard-working people will make the hard-hearted person soften. The cultivator, the continuation of life, the height and the length, lies in the depth of the traces of the world. Jingsheng Shiping sat on the side and listened silently, just got used to it. A stack of formations began to gradually crumble, and those broken flying swords fell between the heavens and the earth like a torrential rain. The golden-filled peak where Yuxian was sitting has completely dissipated, and the Lioli pavilion in the middle of Zhengzhou also fell apart and exploded with a bang. The scene was gorgeous and radiant. A wild world turned the bow of the boat with an extremely subtle range, and slowly shifted to the trajectory laid out by the true spirit of the talisman. Li Sheng Dharma extended a hand to offset some of the momentum for the stacking formation, and the dermish cheek on the side of the ferry boat wall was worn away by the wild world. Qin Pingan kept his eyes closed, sitting in the air with one hand on his abdomen, palm facing up, one hand clenched on his knee, his bones trembled with golden stones and a golden fire flowed out. Mr. Sanshan, the abbot of the Grand Formation, was a little relieved, and constantly adjusted the many subtleties of the Grand Formation. He was no longer as constrained as before, and was able to exert the power of this stacked formation to a greater extent. Because the young hidden officer made an unexpected move, his real body is like a mountain, although his soul is like 1,000 flowers in the mountain burning together, turning into a mighty stream of fire flowing to the foot of the mountain. But fortunately these separate streams, except for deep pools and pools of water formed at the foot of the mountain, and then converged into a river around the mountain, and then a small half of the creeks with dry waterbeds showed a tendency to climb the mountain, and they began to go upstream and return to the major Qi palaces in the mountain. In the end, this fiery person forms a self-circulation that tends to stabilize and become orderly. The 72 waiting formations, one of the stacked formations, were also overwhelmed, and the 72 seals that were the pivot of the formation were broken one after another. The Taoist Chunyang held up a big sun with one hand, pushed it heavily, and then pressed his fingers together to make a sword art, commanding the long sword behind him. Lu Yen twisted his figure and then raised his arms, and directly dragged the rising sun to draw a huge arc, and threw it to the huge gap where the bird in the cage was crushed by the fairy. This magical power with both swordsmanship, the fire was just right, and I saw a brilliant sun rising into the sky, which evolved into a golden robe that was spread out on the way, and then a long sword rope like being implicated. Thousands of scorching suns, layer upon layer, climbed high in turn, until the sky curtain turned into pieces of robes to block the signs of expanding the gap in the wild world. In order to match the heaven position of the great sun, Yu Xian rode the bright moon in the 2-meter formation to fall to the bottom. Lu Yen turned to look at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan straightened his waist slightly and said in his heart, "Don't worry. The hand of Lu Yen and Yu Xian alone is equivalent to pulling Qin Pingan's heavenly soul and earthly soul into a long straight line, like a single tree, supporting the crumbling cage." Zheng Juzhong flicked his sleeves and condensed the originally broken glass pavilion into an unknown talisman that looked like a seal, and stuck it on the door that opened in the sky. At the same time, a sunken blood groove appeared on Qin Ping's forehead. Obviously, Zheng Juzhong is the ally who doesn't care whether Qin Pingan is okay or not. Li Shixing put his fingers together, moved his steps and volleyed in the air, and drew a talisman on the ground like a talisman to fill a gap. The blood groove on Qin Ping's forehead dissipated instantly. It seems that she had been secretly instructed by Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. Bai Jing hesitated for a while, glanced at the mountain master who nodded slightly, and she stepped on the virtual phase leap moon in the stacked formation, and sacrificed a sword towards the heights. Thousands of sword lights like rainbows soaring into the sky, like countless electric lights connecting two seas of clouds, sword lights scurrying in the cage like lightning snakes, and at the same time in the wild world, above hundreds of miles make a thunder pool, and slowly push the bow side of the boat towards the road created by the talisman. Probably for some great monks looking up at the sky in the wild world, it is a celestial robbery who wants to ascend into the sky. Qin Pingan twisted his wrist slightly, took out the 2 talismans from his sleeves, and merged them into the backs of his left and right hands. It stands to reason that Qin Pingan can at least insist on half a stick of incense for short and 1 stick of incense for long. Xiao Mo couldn't stop it, and Bai Jing also appeared in a trance for a moment. Looking at his posture, his own Qin Shanzhu wanted to jump over the wall in a hurry. I saw the right hand that was clenching a fist against the knee, released it gently, and held the hilt of the sword with 5 fingers. The left hand, which is attached to the abdomen with the palm facing upwards, is flipped, which is also a virtual grip, but it is holding the sword edge and slowly moves from right to left. A grain of pure golden light blooms between heaven and earth. Not only did more than 700,000 long swords in the cage vibrate in unison. Even the magic sword of Taoist Chunyang, which was turned into a long rope to hold the sun, shook to a certain extent, and trembled loudly if it met fellow Taoists. The wandering electric snake that Baijing Jingguang transformed into hanging between heaven and earth, like a mountain tree being blown by the wind, fell neatly to one side. Half of the great wall of sword chi with a sword in his hand. Far away in the sky, a young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown shrank his shoulders, stretched out his palm and touched his neck. At this moment, Li Sheng took the lead in squinting and looking into the distance. After a while, a slender black line winds up, and under the black line is a fiery red road. Lu Qin, who was sneakily hiding in the sky of his home to watch the excitement, suddenly widened his eyes and slapped his fists. It's better to come early than to come by chance, feast for the eyes. Seeing that the opportunity was not good, the nameless man immediately reached out and grabbed Li Jiu's shoulder beside him. Yu Xian said solemnly, "It seems to be the ancient scorpion that wandered the depths of Taishu." Zheng Juzhong spoke with Li Sheng and Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. Li Sheng nodded lightly, although Mr. Sanshan Jiuho had a puzzled look on his face, he still ordered the talisman woman to return to his sleeve. In the blink of an eye, this ancient serpent showed its enormous size. The whole wild world is as small as a bead, and it was swallowed by its mouth, and its head shook a little, and it knocked the stack away, and its huge body crushed the brand new road that the rune had painstakingly paved. The bead was spit out, and the head was used again, and the wild world was replaced by a new green way that seemed to be preset, and the snake figure disappeared into the void and disappeared. Just now, I could vaguely see that above the snake's head, there was a Lu Fian, with only skin left and no consciousness. On the road where the snake walked, the thick Dao marks burned by the fire persisted for a long time. Lu Yen shrank the mountains and rivers, walked to the side of the road in one step, crouched down, twisted a little ashes with his fingers. The Taoist real person with the Taoist name, Chunyang, couldn't help sighing, looked up into the distance. Even Dao, can it be burned? Qin Pingan fell to the ground after being hit and rolled all the way. The long sword in his left hand that was about to take shape gradually dissipated, and finally his right hand supported the ground and vomited blood. Li Shixing sighed. Today is only a temporary solution to the urgent need, and every 10 years in the future, there will be a collision between the two worlds that are pulling each other. If the ancient snake does not come to disrupt the situation, Li Sheng may be able to complete his work in one battle. Of course, it may also suffer heavy casualties in the world. Just because there are too many unknown variables, any deduction is meaningless. Mr. Sanxianjiuho returned the array to Qin Pingan. The stacked formation turned into 2 flying swords, Bird in the Cage and Ueguchi, and instantly disappeared into Qin Pingan's eyebrows. Li Sheng looked as usual and bowed his thanks to everyone. You have worked hard. After all, it took 10 more years. Except for Mr. Sanxianjiuho, who remained motionless, the rest of the monks returned their salutes. And Qin Pingan wanted to stand up. Li Sheng stretched out his hand and pressed it and said with a smile, "Take care of your injuries." Xiao Mo came to Qin Pingan's side and supported his son. Qin Pingan stretched out his hand to wipe off the blood on his face, but fortunately he didn't fall down again. Mr. Sanxianjiuho frowned slightly and asked in his heart, "Qin Pingan, why did you use those 2 talismans in advance?" Qin Pingan remained silent. Jingju felt regretful. If Qin Pingan resolutely slashed into the wilderness, Zheng Juzhong would definitely be the first to keep up, adding fuel to the fire. Presumably that Xiao Mo and Bai Jing, the 2 Ascension Realm Sword cultivators, will not be idle, and they are the icing on the cake. Li Shixing will be forced to protect Qin Pingan, and Chunyang Lu Yen will also use his sword to stop Bai Zhe or the Wild Sundial. Seeing the 2 sides of the confrontation, who didn't answer a question, Yu Xian couldn't help feeling that it was nice to be young. Li Sheng smiled and patted the young cultivator's arm and said, "Put yourself in the place and am not used to anyone." In a gap in Taishu that looked like a vortex of a long river of time, Li Jiu, a famously paralyzed face, couldn't help but laugh. It turned out that Anonymous was burned by an inexplicably forked fire path, and the short man who couldn't escape shook his head and tufts of charred hair fell. Li Go held back his laughter, raised his chin and asked curiously, "Who did you provoke before?" "Don't dare to call him by his first name." Anonymous said depressedly, "How is it possible? I have only seen each other a few times from a distance, and it is too late to hide. How dare I take the initiative to provoke?" In the latter part of the ancient years, and before the battle to ascend to the sky, who would dare to provoke those supreme gods in the heaven except for those among the top 10 in the world? Li Sheng took the lead to leave, as if to chase the Taiku snake controlled by the puppet Lu Fian. Li Zixingguang asked the city lord of Baidi City, who was very relaxed from beginning to end, and asked with a smile, "Mr. Zheng, it's better to hit the sun and play chess?" Zheng Juzhong smiled and said, "It's better to wait until the debate between the 3 religions is over. Then I will welcome Headmaster Ko in Baidi City." The 2 sides are playing chess now. No matter how many games it is, after all, it will be impossible to win. Li Shixing nodded and said, "It's better to be respectful than to obey. The real person is mysterious with all directions, and I have never seen any traces of it." You must know that this compliment was spoken by Lu Qin himself. Yu Xian glanced at Zheng Juzhong out of the corner of his eye. The old man twitched his beard and said nothing. "It's strange, how can you 2 have personal grudges? There is only one attitude towards Zheng Juzhong and Yu Xian, and he keeps it at a distance. Just be friends, let alone enemies." Afterwards, Li Shixing walked with Mr. Sanxianjiuho and traveled back to the source along the green road where the big demon first ascended. Yu Xian invited fellow Daoist Chunyang to go to the place where he joined the Dao for a drink. Because Yu Xian was busy joining the road in the outer galaxy before, it was rare for Mr. Sanxianjiuho to take the initiative to show up. Therefore Yu Xian knew a new palm story, and after thousands of years he would take it out to bask in the sun, which is the kind of old story that is talked about with great interest. The previous 5 sword cultivators of the Great Wall of Sword Qi crossed the mountains and rivers in the wild world with the 3 mountain talismans in hand. Because after Qin Pingan and the others burned incense to respect, it didn't take long for another green smoke to rise up in front of Mr. Sanxianjiuho. The second group of people, the number of people who worship the incense is not too many, only 9 people, but the incense is equally prosperous and the atmosphere is great. Xiaoxia, Yuanyu. The two direct disciples of Zheng Juzhong and Beidasheng opened the door and closed the door. Fu Su and Gu Kan Chunqing, a girl from the line of Tianqing Divine Mountain in Zhuhai Cave, a Taoist priest from Tianshifu in Longhu Mountain, a monk from Pasan Temple in Zhongtu, Su Bai who was born in the line of the ancestral family of the military family. In short, Confucianism, Taoism and militarism, the three religions have all. In such a short period of time, there have been two groups of people holding the three mountain talismans across the mountains and rivers to return the salute, and they are still very young, not ordinary young people. So even Mr. Sanxianjiuho was a little surprised, and there was a rare smile on his face. Unlike many great monks, what he values is the future and the future of others. If we talk about the past, the prosperous years, after all, are the old yellow calendar. In the future there are infinite possibilities. Like a book, it always takes a plot twist that surprises the viewer. And the content that has been thoroughly familiar in the front, no matter how amazing people and things are, at most you can go back and read it a few times, but memories and nostalgia are easy to make people in the book feel sad. Some things can be said or not. At that time, Yu Xian and Qin Pingan, a young man, actually had no friendship at all. Just because in the Jinjiaza battlefield, Qin Pingan's pioneering disciple Zheng Qian, the little girl who is resolute in her work and treats people with sincerity, impressed the old real person very well, and by the way she went to the young hidden official who had never been masked. The look and feel is good, what kind of master brings out what kind of apprentice. That's why Yu Shenkai said with a very meaningful smile that he had to pay tribute to the incense twice, thanks to that fellow Qin Xiaodao. At that time the young cultivator hesitated for a while but nodded. It is a reluctance to agree with Yu Xian's statement. It's not that this Mr. 3 Mountains in 9 Hours thinks too much of himself and is stingy with good words, but because Yu Xian told him a heartfelt word before. Therefore, his nodding was equivalent to being forced to give an answer. It turned out that Yu Xian had asked about it before. Was it because Zhilan was in power and had to get rid of it? After that, in order to mend the land shortage of Tongye continent, Qin Pingan borrowed landscapes from the princes, as if, I am the host. The nod of Mr. Sanxianjiuho in the outer Xinghe, Qin Pingan is equal to a legitimate will, just like a local official who is a senior official in the frontier, gets an official document issued by the court and does things logically. Of course, Mr. Sanxianjiuho didn't nod, and Qin Pingan could still make up for the lack of ground, but the final effect would not be so good. This kind of opportunity to enjoy the scenery outside is really rare, so Qin Pingan took Xiaoma and Beijing back to Haoran slowly. And Qin Pingan's heart that has not been recovered, saw a scene after going against the current with the sword holder for thousands of years. Let Qin Pingan go for a long time and be dazed. The setting sun melts gold and the twilight clouds blend together. On a mountain top, the night was dark and there was a bonfire around. In addition to the world's top 10 and 4 candidates, there are many figures. Sword of Coming Chapter 1006. Qin Pingan asked, what was the specific situation in the depths of the Yuzhou earth vessel? Beijing has returned to the appearance of a girl with a sable hat, and he answered nonchalantly, you know the general reason and process of the fire and water dispute back then? Qin Pingan said, I have only heard some rough inside stories, most of which are fragmentary words, and barely know a few important points. That truly earth-shattering battle of water and fire was of course the most important fuse. Because the incense and incense offered by spiritual beings can temper the golden body of the gods, resulting in the 2 gods who are also ranked among the top 5. Unprecedented road battle. According to Qing Tong, the result of that fight was that the pillar of the sky is broken and the earth is maintained, and the entire heavenly way is tilted accordingly, which in turn makes the moving trajectories of the sun, moon and stars more and more obvious, and this leads to the future generations. Many channels. At the same time, countless gods who participated in the war fell to the earth like meteors, and the fires and prairie were all over the place. This is not only the catastrophe of all sentient beings on the earth, but also the second big opportunity for Taoist priests, after skills fall like rain. Beijing obviously didn't believe this rhetoric, glanced at the young mountain master and said with a smile, is this really the case? Qin Pingan smiled and said, allow me to take a breath and take a break before rushing. The wind outside the sky greatly consumes the mind and aura of the Qi practitioners. Originally, the earth immortal practitioners were like drowning. Fortunately, this vast expanse is too vast, and there are still some scattered and overflowing spiritual Qi tides for Qin Pingan to absorb. However, at the current speed of Qin Pingan, if he wants to return to the vast world, It is estimated that he will have enough energy, and on the premise that his own spiritual chi reserves are sufficient, but also to spend a month's time. Therefore, when Qin Pingan can adjust the 5 elements of life and disordered spiritual energy in his body, he still needs Bai Jing to clear the way and Xiaomo to help. The 3 sword cultivators stood upright, and Bai Jing couldn't look down on the tide of spiritual energy around them, as if he could only catch a few small fish at a time by casting a net. Bai Jing said with a smile, "This time I was personally invited by the little master to go to the outer world. The mountain owner did not benefit much and contributed a lot." Qin Pingan said modestly, "There is no credit, only a little hard work, not worth mentioning." Bai Jing asked tentatively, "Do you really want to pay back the 600 gold and copper coins that Zheng Juzhong and Fu Luyuxuan borrowed from Beidasheng?" Xiaomo rubbed his brows when he heard the words. Qin Pingan said angrily, "It's only right and proper to pay back the debt. There is no reason to borrow money and not pay it back." Bai Jing quickly saw the wind and turned the rudder. Yes, it's not difficult to borrow and borrow again, that's the reason. Originally, she wanted to have a kind word with Lord Qin Shan. The city lord of Baidi City at first glance, is a very difficult owner. The money must be paid back. There is no written receipt and I will wait for him to join the 14th realm later. After entering the 14th realm, do you still have the face to ask Qin Pingan for money? After a few more years, maybe it can be converted into Guyu money. There is still a surplus of 300 gold and copper coins in Luopao Xuanhuan mansion, and I will return it to the old immortal. If you are willing to run errands with this huge sum of money, I will thank you here first. With such a huge sum of money, Qin Pingan was really worried about sending it to Taofu Mountain filling Gold Peak through Feijian. The dojo is located in Fuliyuxuan on the golden-filled peak. The old real person is the founder of Taofu Mountain. This mountain is currently the only mountain in the world that has authentic, upper and lower sects at the same time. There are always some Yishio who are full and supportive, and like the idea of passing the letter Feijian. In history there are many cross-continental flying swords carrying important secret treasures and letters. Bai Jing asked, "The mountain master can rest assured that I will travel to Middle-earth alone? Aren't you afraid that I will raise a flag of Luapa Mountain, Fox Fake Tiger Power, and cause trouble outside?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Just look at what Miss Xie did when she entered Luzhou from Beiju and traveled across the continent to Luopao Mountain. You can rest assured." Bai Jing glanced at Xiaomo. If Xiaomo was willing to travel to China, she wouldn't mind taking a long trip, drinking a little wine on the way. Drunk wine is a color medium, he. Xiaomo said, "Now that the young master is injured, I will not leave the Dali realm without authorization." Qin Pingan suddenly asked, "In the area of the Qingdao track where the stacked formation just now is, how much of the surrounding aura tide is left?" Bai Jing was immediately stunned. No wonder Qin Pingan was so crawling and swaying in the wind. Did he have a plan to return to the carbine? Just wait for Li Sheng and the others to leave, then go to clean up the battlefield and clean up the mess? Xiaomo gave a rough answer. Getting together is equivalent to a fairy's spiritual energy reserve. Bai Jing rubbed his hands together and smiled. "I'm afraid that the old woman who is proficient in this way will return and she will be the first to climb up. Mountain Master, if you want to go, let's hurry up." Qin Pingan nodded, his body transformed into 18 white rainbow sword lights, and he turned back the same way. Bai Jing snorted and clicked his tongue, not looking like he was injured at all. On the way to control the sword, Bai Jing couldn't help but ask in his heart, Xiaomo, what did your son see before, so angry that he almost couldn't hold back his sword and slashed into the wilderness?" In the wild land, a fake Xuanhuan appeared. "Who?" "Xuanhuan, he is the most powerful sword cultivator on the Great Wall of Sword Qi after the eldest sword immortal. If he hadn't died in battle, Xuanhuan would have been a pure sword cultivator in the 14th realm." The young master guessed that the original battle was the ultimate goal of the Wild Demon clan. There is only one: kill Xuanhuan to prevent the appearance of the second 14th realm on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. When Xuanhuan was alive, his reputation was very good, and the son admired this senior very much. Fengshua Temple Sword Immortal Wei and Jin received a sword manual that was given by Qin Qingdu and passed down from Xuanhuan, and Wei Jin, who was regarded as the best candidate to inherit Xuanhuan's swordsmanship by the boss sword immortal, was unable to the favor of those few strands of ancient sword intent lies in the young demon sword cultivator, one of the 100 sword immortals in Toyue Mountain. When practicing swords in the city, Jian Xiu used Lu Fian, or the water taught by Zhoumi privately. The Moon View and the White Bone View trying to imitate a brand new sword Xiu Zongyuan. However, because of the words of the boss, Jianxian, and the fact that Wei and Jin had enough swordsmanship, the wild world and the Great Wall of Sword Qi each had their own gains. Zhou still succeeded in his calculations and he was done, and the world saw Xuanhuan again. Wei Jin inherited the four-sword intents left by Xuanhuan, and only said that the ancestors in Feishing City had a genealogy, and Wei Jin belonged to Xuanhuan's line of sword cultivators. Really starving to death, timid, daring to die. The savage old woman with a cane was really hit by Jing. When Qin Pingan and the others rushed to the old track of Qingdao, the old woman was swallowing the tide of spiritual energy. Breaking down the unique Taoist meaning of the Qingdao, a little spiritual energy is just a bonus, and the latter is the key to the old woman's return to the outer world at risk. Bai Jing didn't say a word, just slashed out with a sword, and the dark sky was instantly torn out into a long snow-white line. Perhaps this was the way the ancient demons greeted each other. Guan Yi appeared out of thin air, stood in front of the old woman, stretched out his hand and grabbed the white thread. His palm shook, the white thread of the sword light wrapped around her entire arm, the electric light bloomed, and there was a sound, and finally the sword light smashed Guan Yi's body. A snow-white arm, but Guan Yi's shoulder moved slightly, and she gave birth to a complete arm. Bai Jing wondered, Guan Yi, in order to help her get this spiritual energy and moral meaning, you are an outsider, you can't commit revenge against me, right? Are your brains growing on your chest? Guan Yi smiled bitterly and said, if I ask for something, I have to help. Any cultivator with a little brain would not want to get entangled with things like Bai Jing. Bai Jing stretched out a palm and hooked his fingers. It's a matter of fact, it's easy to discuss. Without any hesitation, Guan Yi threw an ancient tree branch with green buds at Bai Jing, which was the bankruptcy of wealth and disaster. The old woman's figure dissipated and Guan Yi disappeared with it. Xiaomo turned his head to look down at a place and Qin Pingan shook his head and said, forget it, the other party came prepared, and it is not appropriate to pursue and kill him. Bai Jing looked around and said, it's just the leftovers, there's not much spiritual energy left. Qin Pingan said, mosquito legs are also meat, so I have the help of Miss Lao Xia, how much can be recovered? Bai Jing was reluctant, but just remembered that she had just obtained a treasure, and changed her face to a bright smile. She raised one arm like a flag and shook it vigorously for a few times, and the spiritual energy came frantically. Qin Pingan estimated that this income is equivalent to the wealth of a cultivator of the Jade Purity realm. These auras are put into the lotus flower-blessed land and scattered into the heaven and the earth. It may not be particularly significant for the entire blessed land. A certain dojo immortal mansion such as Jiejin's Hushan School, a certain Dao's Shanjun mansion, or a gift to the Taishenghuang of Nanyuan Kingdom who was transferred to the mountain to practice, is a large sum of money. As for the 3 waves of spiritual energy that had been drawn through the stacking formation, Qin Pingan planned to take one from Luopao Mountain and Qingping Sword Sect, and put the last one into Changchundongtian Qisong Mountain on Mishue Peak. Bai Jing condensed this spiritual energy into a bead the size of a green apricot, and threw it to Qin Pingan. It wasn't a waste of time. Qin Pingan put it in his sleeve. The Taoist meaning of Qing Dao's trajectory is naturally more rare than the spiritual beads that are usually condensed into real objects by the great monks. They returned to Howren in the wind again and Qin Pingan asked casually, Miss Xie, where did that branch come from? Bai Jing laughed and said, God knows where Guan Yi's mother-in-law picked it up. It's not worth a lot of money. Qin Pingan imitated Bai Jing, stretched out a palm and hooked it. According to the agreement, sit on the ground and divide the spoils. Bai Jing, who was thinking about how to get through the barriers, had to raise his sleeves high, and finally stretched out his hand and took out 3 green beads as big as a fist. Putting them together, they weighed their palms lightly, turned to look at Bai Jing and said with a smile, I heard Xiaomo mention that Miss Xie is in Shijingshan City on Beiju Luzhou, and she often sets up a stall to do business. It's a pity. It's just that every time the business is not very prosperous and you can't earn a few coins, it's not because of the lack of jeans and liang, right? It was rare for Xiaomo to help Bai Jing to say a fair word. Sir, Bai Jing didn't deduct a few pounds privately, which is equivalent to the spiritual energy savings of 2 ordinary Ascension Realm cultivators. From this, it can be seen that Qin Pingan's hard-earned spiritual qi tied through a stacked formation is not as good as Bai Jing's casual sacrifice of a few magic weapons. Qin Pingan's face was full of surprise. If you agree to split the account by 5 or 5, it will be split between 5 and 5. I never thought of thanking the girl for her burden of fasting, but it is still the way to treat people with sincerity and sincerity. Bai Jing rubbed the sable hat, she was moved, Xiaomo Jiner turned his elbow towards her. In fact, Qin Pingan deliberately asked this question, which is equivalent to giving Xiaomo a favor. Qin Pingan throws the pole, Xiaomo takes the bait and Shigo bites the bait. Everyone is happy. Qin Pingan overlooked a magnificent world. In addition to the cycle of the sun and the moon, there are still 5 auxiliary stars. Among them there is the bright red Xuanhuan star. The number of paths is the most uncertain. The sun and the moon are added with 5 stars, and the light shines on the world, so they are collectively called the 7 luminaries. Among them the wood is called suishing, which is the largest in size. It takes 12 years to revolve around it once. It is the same as the earthly branch, hence the name sui. After a total beheading, the first ancestor of the military family was imprisoned in the star that symbolized the killing. Since ancient times, the intricate records of the Qin Tianjian of various dynasties and generations, about all kinds of terrifying and suspicious celestial phenomena, many related to this star. Every time there is a celestial astronomy that confuses and guards the heart, it is an invisible big test for the secular monarch in the world. Qin Pingan said, "Monsieur digressed earlier, let's continue talking." According to the news from the Shuixi side of the Changchun Palace, in the depths of the Yuzhou earth vessel, the remaining 6 monks from the Dali earth branch should meet with Bai Jing. Foreshadowing, how can it be considered a digression? Bai Jing smiled and defended herself, and then she took out a thick stack of paper from her sleeve. The paper was extremely thin, so there were a lot of them. The contents of the pictures were scenes from ancient times, and each page could be described as an isolated copy. If it were compiled into a book and the pages were quickly turned, it would look like a little book sold by a market bookstore to children. Bai Jing threw it to Qin Pingan and said, "Declare in advance, it's just for borrowing." Qin Pingan took over the stack of papers with many visions of heaven and earth, and smiled for no reason. In fact, it is more like the textbooks when Xiao Haitan went to school to study. In the margins of each page he drew a little man. The old cook once stole a book as evidence of Pei Qian's hard work, and replaced it with another book, and also intentionally drew some identical little people. It's just that Pei Qian has a lot of finesse, and for some reason she found something wrong. At that time she was so anxious that she would be seen by Master accidentally. As a result, Pei Qian rummaged through the box and couldn't find the runaway book. She suspected that a thief had committed the crime, so she lightly grabbed the ear of the right guardian of Qilong Lane with one hand, and stepped on the tail of the left guardian of Kalongxiang with one foot, asking the 2 of them to quickly confess and be lenient. Qin Pingan first glanced at all the pages that were quickly flipping in his hands, and then read it again from the beginning. This time it was slow. One of the pages has 2 blank spaces, which are located in the northwest and southeast of the page, one of which is burning like a fire, and the other is soaked with water. In the previous chat with Qing Tong, Qin Pingan used a very rustic but extremely appropriate metaphor at that time, just like the burning and turning of the soil in the fields of later generations, so that the earth, through the infusion of rich and abundant spiritual energy, has changed from a barren land to a barren land. Fertile land. Because the corpses of many gods scattered all over the place themselves have become the source of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. When a big year is encountered, the year is good and there is a big harvest. Countless cultivators have been in it, and each has the opportunity to occupy the treasures of feng shui, and they have opened up dojos one after another to gather the treasures of heaven and earth. On the earth there are bare, Taoist veins everywhere. It is only because of the innumerable books that were originally hidden, such as Lei Han, because of the golden fragments of many fallen gods in the 2 divisions of Tianting, water and fire, and at the same time the extremely powerful generals of the Leibu divisions. It is no exaggeration to say that in the years when geniuses were born in large numbers and Taoist priests were springing up like bamboo shoots after a rain, the opportunities on the ground were simply, just pick it up, not take your neighbors. Bai Jing sighed endlessly. When the battle to ascend to the sky is over, the cultivators in the world will finally turn their backs on the guest. Or is it that the monks in the world today can easily obtain the true meaning of the word wujing? So outside the sky, when she saw Li Jiu, who was about the same number as Li Shixing, she became angry. How could Bai Jing know the relationship between the young scholar he saw and the great headmaster of Baiyujing? In the words of the most holy master, if Ko Ming was born in the ancient times, he would definitely be among the top 10 heroes of the ancient times. At least there is no suspense to find a candidate. The difference between the 10 heroes and the candidates actually does not only refer to the level of realm cultivation, but more to the degree of credit for opening up the road. Like Lan Qi, who created the art of refining things, she only talked about her ability to fight and fight. Although the magic weapons were piled up into mountains, she was actually not as good as those candidates. But that didn't stop her from becoming one of the most respected top 10. Qin Pingan asked, "Miss Xie, which way do you want to go?" Xiego glanced at Xiaomo. His face was full of resentment, and he was extremely aggrieved. "Do you also talk about this kind of thing? Who is his own and who is an outsider can Xiaomo not know?" Qin Pingan said to himself, "A sword light, infinitely small, is destined to be unable to find the smallest one that makes up the world. It is too difficult." Bai Yujing Lu Shen is a negative example, and he has not been able to find it so far. It is a path of 15 realms other than the establishment of a religion and the ancestor, so I think the pursuit is infinite, and the probability of success may be greater. I have to admit that, deep in Qin Pingan's heart, Lu Chen actually has a better chance of reaching the 15th realm than the really invincible one. After all, no one has dared to say that he has found the smallest of all things. Dao Ancestor may have found it, but Dao Kudao is very Dao, saying that he is not right? However, the pursuit of the infinitely vast world seems to be empty, but it is still relatively simple, of course only in relative terms. The two natal flying swords, Sparrow in the Cage and Ueguchi, are currently taking this road to improve their rank. As for whether they can open up a new path in the future and obtain some kind of brand new magical power, they can only take a step by step. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "And this kendo, which strives to be broad and immeasurable, is in line with Miss Xie's character." Xiego hesitated for a moment, then shook his head and said, "Qin Pingan, you are still thinking too simply." How to say? Many years ago I stepped into a great hall unintentionally, and saw that kind of imagination that was embodied. It was a strange realm that could not be described in words. As long as you dare to think, it seems that you can do anything. It can be realized, the real and the fake, the false and the real. It is completely reversed. No, it can't be said to be reversed. The real and the illusory have been confused. There is no boundary at all. I don't know how many earth immortals are trapped in it. A Taoist heart is like a deep quagmire that cannot be extricated and gradually decays and dies. Hearing this, Xiaomo finally said, "It is said that only the Buddha can completely suppress this state, otherwise even the Taoist ancestors and the most holy teachers can only retreat. Alas, the Buddha is the only transcendental being who is truly free from all obstacles. Indeed, it cannot be more powerful." Xiego looked envious, nodded vigorously and said, "It is said that the Buddha's Dharma is as numerous as the sand of the Ganges, and it can spread throughout the past, present, and future. No matter how powerful our swordsmanship is, we are incomparable." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Miss Xie, you don't seem to have said how you left that hall." Xiego stretched out his hand and scratched his face, with a rare look of embarrassment. After that, Qin Pingan asked Xiaoma to help, and the speed of Yufeng skyrocketed. During the period when he passed by Suishing, the strong turbulence and the majestic wind, I am afraid that the earth immortal cultivator will be dragged and torn into pieces if he is not careful, but it is an end. The perfect place for a martial artist to beat the body. The effect is good, just like beating the tide, but due to the rules of the Confucian temple, pure martial arts cannot be casually controlled by the wind and the sky. Presumably it has something to do with the first ancestor of the military family who sits in Yinghua. Just passing by this year's star at this moment, Qin Pingan suddenly noticed a trace of breath, and immediately turned his head to look, and vaguely saw the slim figure of a man in a Confucian shirt. For a long time I do not know who is playing the iron flute, and the clear sound breaks the sky. Qin Pingan immediately asked Xiaomo to stop his sword and bow to the unknown Confucian sage. By the time Qin Pingan bowed to his feet, that figure had already dissipated in the wind whirlpool, and he had no intention of greeting them politely. After Qin Pingan and his party continued on their way, Li Sheng appeared at the edge of a vortex in Suishing. There was a scholar sitting in the center of the vortex. There was a stone platform in front of him. 2 stacks of books were placed, divided into 9 and 14. The top 2 books were written Luxiazu and Juzhou respectively. When the scholar saw Li Sheng, he didn't get up to greet him, but just called Li Sheng Little Master. The scholar asked, "In the next 10 years will you find a good helper?" Li Sheng nodded and said, "Next time there will be enough manpower and you can call a group of young people." The scholar glanced into the distance and said, "The 10,000-year sentence is about to end." Li Sheng said. Li Sheng asked with a smile, "Have you met face to face?" The scholar nodded and said, "As expected, our close disciple of Wensheng's lineage has taken great pains to return to the sky to pick up leaks. It is indeed a good material for business. Li Xing said, Fu Sheng once proposed to let Qin Pingan secretly enter the Confucian temple and serve as the god of wealth for a period of time. He used his expertise to be responsible for allocating the materials of the entire vast world into the wild. He was only scolded by the old scholar before giving up. There are very few visitors here, and the only Qi practitioners outside Confucianism are Lu Kaishan of Aizhou, and the businessman Mr. Fan. Approaching Howren, Xiego said casually, Qin Shanzhu, the real person of Chunyang, those swordsmanships are shaking, they look quite good, who did you learn the skills from? Qin Pingan said, Senior Chunyang taught himself, and there is no teacher in the mountains. Xiego pouted, obviously not believing it, and asked again, You seem to be very afraid of that surname Zheng? Qin Pingan smiled and said, I advise you one day you will get rid of the relationship with Luapa Mountain. If Miss Ye can stay in the Howren world and sway freely, whoever can provoke it, just don't provoke this Mr. Zheng. Xiego smiled and said, 14 realms, who would dare to provoke them? Xiao Mo said solemnly, By Jing, even if Mr. Zheng is only in the Ascension realm, you can't arbitrarily provoke him. Xiego smiled sweetly, pretended to be shy and said, Little Imo, I've changed my name, just call me Plum Blossom in the future. Ignoring the flirting of the 10,000-year-old friends, Qin Pingan suddenly said, Let's take a detour, change to another sky gate, and take a trip to Middle-earth Divine Continent first. Xiao Mo just nodded. Xiego rubbed his hands and said, What are you doing? Smash the field? I remember the previous real person named Chunyang who joined forces with Yu Xian, followed the vine and touched the melon, and fell a sword towards the Middle-earth Divine Continent. Could it be that you have to rush to the door to ask for an explanation? No overnight feud? Qin Shanzhu, your temper is so bad. Qin Pingan smiled and said, What else can I do? I'm a little Qi practitioner in the nascent soul realm, I'm just a fox and a tiger. The sage who guards one of the heavenly curtains of the divine continent in the Middle Earth is a burly old man with big beard. Hearing that the group is going to enter the Middle Earth through this, he opened the door without saying anything. The young hidden officer clasped his fists in thanks, Xiao Mo followed, and Xiego even lifted up the skirt and gave him 1,000 blessings. The old man just felt awkward. That sable-capped girl was light on her feet. She is really virtuous, a lady of all, with such a good match. Xiao Mo is really lucky she has. Yanfu. After entering the gate, 3 dazzling sword lights all fell in a single line, heading straight for the Yinyang family Lu clan of the Middle-earth Divine Continent. 3 uninvited guests, 2 Ascension Realm sword cultivators, 1 peak and 1 consummation. The latter is already standing at the door. After all, it is only 1 step away from the 14th realm. Of course, Xiaoma also briefly entered this perfect situation. Qin Pingan and Xiao Mo were both swooping upside down, but Xiego wrapped his arms around his chest, hugging the mink hat he just took off, and letting the wind blow. His hair was like an umbrella, revealing a smooth full forehead. Xiao Mo asked, Young master, is there the Lu clan's formation below? Qin Pingan squinted and smiled and said, There is a burst and someone beat someone. Xiego grinned and said, Qin Shanzhu, I think you are more and more appetizing. Qin Pingan teased, I'm a family man, monsieur, please don't change your mind and teach Xiao Mo to be sad. Xiego scratched his face, Xiao Mo, don't worry, I definitely won't. I swear I will love you for at least 10,000 years. Xiao Mo sternly turned a deaf ear. Probably because he was in a good mood, Xiego suddenly increased his speed and directly broke the large formation of the Lu family with his feet, and the sound of glass shattering resounded in the air. When Qin Pingan and Xiao Mo landed on the Xiantai, the highest forbidden area of the Lu family, Xiego had already cut a hole in the Xiantai, which had only half of it left, and the whole person was slanted and nailed into the ground. The sable-capped girl shook her shoulders, pulled her legs out of the ground one after another, and then with a hoot, she leaned back and fell to the ground. Qin Pingan's face was expressionless, and he had no reason to think of the touching porcelain, on his way to the Mural City in his early years, and then looking at the thanking dog, his acting skills were also a bit clumsy. Dressed in a cyan robe, with his hands wrapped around his sleeves, he stood on half of the Citian terrace, overlooking the Lu family, which was as large as a dynasty city. Xiao Mo with a yellow hat and blue shoes, holding a green bamboo stick, reminded Bai Jing to stop pretending, Can you ask Lu Shi for a few medical bills? Qin Pingan stretched out of the hand pointed to a place near the Xiantai. The security was heavily guarded. Xiego broke the formation one after another, and all the sword energy was blocked. Mostly it is the Jilan office. The ancestor of the Lu family was Taibu, one of the 6 officials of the Confucian Temple. So that Lu Wei received a large amount of dividends, and the bottleneck of the fairyland showed a sign of loosening. If he hadn't traveled to the capital of Dali, he had to be a lobbyist for Lu Jiang, and the boat capsized in the gutter accidentally, and the immortal Lu Wei the marriage should have been completed, and he should return to the Lu clan in the Middle Earth and retreat to seek the Ascension realm. The ugliness of the family should not be made public. Lu Wei was in the Dali palace at the time. Whether it was a long-standing depression in his heart, he did not vomit unhappily, or he had no intentions, he had vomited some bitterness with Chen Pingan. According to this immortal, the Lu family was really serious. It is too large and there are constant disputes between the sect and several side branches, as well as within the sect. It's not just that kind of conflict of interests, but there are also many subtle differences on the road. Therefore, the results of the Lu family's ancestral hall discussions and those who leave the ancestral hall are often contradictory to outsiders who see flowers in the fog. Lu Xun, who seemed to be left to the side, looked calm, but continued to say to himself, "I want to ask Qin Shanju for advice. I don't know if that 6-man thunder seal with upside-down characters came from the hands of a patriarch of my family?" According to Lu's genealogy, an old man like Lu Wei would have to call Lu Qin his uncle. As a result, Lu Wei was detained by such a seal, which was most likely made by Lu Qin himself, and almost lost his soul. Qin Pingan asked knowingly, "A certain patriarch? The Lu family tree is so thick. As an outsider who is a guest of the Lu family for the first time, how do I know which patriarch Lu is talking about?" One of the young women standing beside the juvenile, in a middle-aged manner, she actually laughed out loud. Even though she was of the same clan with the same surname, she really didn't give any face to the head of the family, Lu Xun. From this, it can be seen that there are many hills within the Lu clan of the Yinyang family, each forming a formation, which is not a false statement. And she is indeed qualified to not sell face to Lu Xun, because Lu has a line of Taoism, and its importance is not inferior to that of the Sky Watchers. It is responsible for assisting Fengdu, ensuring that people and ghosts in the world have different paths, and that there are different paths. Therefore, the land officials of the Lu family in this vein are very in love with Fengdu and the Temple of Heaven's God. And she happens to be the ancestor of this lineage. Lu Xun took the initiative to speak twice, but Qin Pingan ignored it. The sable-capped girl sitting on the ground deliberately added fuel to the jealousy. "Can you bear this, old man? They all say that hitting people is not slapping in the face, and being so bullied by a young junior, you must not roll up your sleeves and fight hard." Xiego cried out again and again, only to remember that she was still seriously injured. She reached out and rubbed her knee and immediately shuddered, shouting that it was in pain and she was limping. A tall and thin old man with a clear appearance, his heart is full of resentment. When did my Lu family's ancestral land fall to the point of being played by outsiders and wild? That is, the leader of the Confucian Temple offering wine and coming to my Lu family as a guest, different from the need to abide by the etiquette everywhere, the respect that should be given not lacking at all. Qin Pingan moved to the edge of the Sidian terrace, stomped his feet lightly, stomped half a brick to the ground, and stared at the Lu family's patriarch. "If it weren't for my friend Lu Tai, I would definitely visit the Jilan office today and borrow it from you. It takes a few books to walk before leaving." Last time, Qin Pingan reminded Lu Wei, "Remember to send a message to Lu clan in Middle Earth, and don't make Delice idea in the future." He also told Lu Wei that he completely opened the skylight. "Your appearance, Lu Wei, is equivalent to Lu's taking the lead in asking about the sword, while Qin Pingan and Luo Pashan have officially led the sword. For the monks on the mountain, this is actually a complete tear in the face. I heard an outsider mention Lu Taiwan. Several old people looked unhappy. Just because Lu Tai, a rebellious and unfilial descendant from a clan, almost brought disaster to the entire family. As a result, an ancient well that seemed to hang upside down appeared over the entire Xiantai. The well was facing down, blocking the sky and the sun. Of all the Sky Watchers gathered at the Xiantai at that time, there were only 3 who fell on the spot. And the rarity of each Lu Sky Watcher is completely unimaginable to the outside world. If it wasn't for the beginning of the vision of heaven and earth, the patriarch Lu Xun immediately used the 2 heavy treasures enshrined in the ancestral hall to block the fall of the deep well. I am afraid that including the Si Tiantai, there is absolutely no turbidity. The Jilan department will be affected. As if his scar had been exposed, the tall and thin old man couldn't help but sternly reprimanded. "Shu Zi became famous, so bold, how dare he make a big deal here?" Xiego jumped up. Old thief who borrowed your courage to dare to be so shameless to the son of my little Imo? In an instant, Lu Xun rolled up his sleeves and drew a circle in front of him, and a brilliant gossip mirror appeared in the air. A snow-white sword light instantly hit the gossip picture, the flames splashed everywhere, a crack gradually appeared in the gossip mirror, and the cracking sound of the mirror surface became louder and louder. At the door of Xilan office, a lazy young man stepped out from among the painted door gods, and rubbed his eyes as if he had not woken up. As a result, Xiego held a sword through his abdomen and nailed it into the door. Xiego was held back by the backhand of the young man who let the long sword lazily cut his body, turned and pressed it on the door. The girl grinned. The young man seemed to have succeeded, but suddenly his body flew backwards and swept away, with his fingers close together to make a move, and a group of blooming sword light appeared in front of him, which was compressed within 10 feet. If the power of the sword light was not suppressed by the secret method, the whole seat, even if the Xilan department is scrapped. The young cultivator sighed and stopped. It turned out that this Dharma image had been cut into pieces by countless invisible sword chi. And he is Lu Xun's out-of-bodying god, but he is not a yang god. Lu Xun asked, Master Qin Shan, is this going to start a war? Qin Pingan took the silver deer back into his sleeve and greeted Xiego again, let's go. The sable-capped girl who was squatting on the wall of the Xilan office snorted, turned into a sword light and rose from the ground, followed Xiao Mo and left. The terrified tall and thin old man gritted his teeth and said, what a shame. And the woman who seemed to be afraid that the world would not be in chaos nodded and said, yes, it's a shame, but that's it. Lu Xun just looked up at the half-collapsed Xiantai with a solemn expression and sighed softly. On their way back to the sky, Xiego complained that his hands were not warm, which was too unsatisfactory. Xiao Mo asked, young master? Because Xiao Mo found the sun next to him, he seemed to be absent-minded. Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled, it's nothing, it's just distraction. 10,000 years ago by the bonfire on the top of the mountain. Qin Pingan alone is a Taoist who has traveled far in mind to know and guess his identity. There are the most holy teachers, Taoist ancestors and Buddhas. The first monk in the world, Lan Qi the ghost, the leader of Kendo Wu Zhu, the first ancestor of the military family. Qin Qingdu Li Xing Baizhe Mr. Sanshan Jiuho. A woman in high spirits, she raised her hand and shook an item that had just been cast in her hand. Look, wait, it must be of great use. The young monk on the side stretched out his hand and said with a smile, I'll take a look. There was a burly middle-aged scholar with both hands clenched on his knees, eyes closed, or nodding or shaking his head. Sitting next to him, Wu Zhu, with his words like songs and chants, discussed the rhythm with the later most holy teacher. Little Master, the future saint, holding a branch and drawing circles on the ground. Baizhe squatted aside, resting his cheek with one hand, watching the little master's pen strokes. A young Taoist priest, with a gourd vine hanging from his waist, pinching his fingers with one hand, constantly changing, spreading out his palm with one hand, carefully watching the lines on the palm. Hearing this sentence, after a moment of silence, they burst into laughter together. This is what was once the earth on earth. And they are about to go to war for the entire world and heaven. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.